Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of council. Thank you very much for joining us this evening at our pre-budget consultation. I see that we have quorum, and I call this special meeting of Committee of the Whole to order. We will begin first with the adoption of the agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribiak, that the agenda for the December 8th, 2014 special meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted. Are there any additions to the agenda? I believe there were two. Madam Clerk, you heard that there might be two other presentations.
Yes, for you, Mr. Mayor, we have received two additional requests to speak as part of the presentation input, one from Maple Acre and one from the second annual Diesel Classic Hockey Tournament.
Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder to add those? Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Ribiak. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. And now to the agenda as amended. I just want to speak. There is an opportunity, if there are others that would like to present, you don't have to actually be added to the agenda. So there is a spot later on under 5.8 that says public input, and anybody is welcome to make a presentation. Are we ready for calling the question? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That's any conflicts of interest that any members of council may have. Do any members have any conflicts that they need to disclose? Councillor Ribiak, do you have any? Okay, can that be noted, please, that there are no conflicts of interest? Thank you. Now we'll move to presentations and input from residents and the public regarding the 2015 budget. And our first presentation is up on the screen. It is representatives of the Municipal Grants Committee. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you could introduce yourself to, council knows you, but the public may not.
All right. My name is James Federico. I'm a citizen of Pelham. I'm here representing the Municipal Grants Committee. Thank you, Mayor, councillors, citizens. What we're doing today is the town has a budget of about $38,000 that they give out to community organizations who request it, and we sat as a group and, excuse me. Is it that bad? We've thrown already?
Not yet, thanks.
So we sat as a group and evaluated the requests and dispersed them as we saw fit, and so we're presenting those recommendations tonight.
And there is a microphone there, and I encourage all to kind of use that microphone because we are taping this and it will go up on the website so that folks who aren't here can see it. So thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so committee structure. This committee is new this year. It was put in place by a policy that was presented and accepted by council, so you should be all pretty familiar with it on this side. I'll go quickly for this side. The committee was made up of myself, Kevin Bollybrook, and Sheila Shefsky, who I don't see. Kevin's hiding in the back corner there. And we were facilitated by Carrie Pupo. This is the part I'm going to skip through. Grants were open from September 1st to September 30th. Organizations with a need based on project or perhaps operating offsets could fill out a form and apply to a maximum of $5,000. They were evaluated based on 5 criteria that the organization put up a little bit of their own money. Sheila's made it as well. She's on this side of the room. Excellent. That the organization put up 25% of their own money toward the project or initiative that they're looking for. That the organization extend its services to the general public as described in the Ontario Human Rights Code. That the organization not be a funding body, so that they're not taking Town of Pelham grants and just flowing it through as another grant of their own. That the organization be located in Pelham or demonstrate that their project will benefit the citizens of Pelham. And there's a check at the end to make sure that the town or another regional organization or another organization isn't already offering that service, so there's not a duplication. We met in the last 2 weeks. The first time we took a cut through the grants and picked the ones that we liked the best, and came up with some questions that we wanted to ask some others that we weren't quite so sure about, which Carrie brought back to the organizations. We met a second time, evaluated the answers we received, and made our final recommendations for grant awards. Aside from the 5 principles that were laid out in the policy, we as a group came pretty quickly together to some guiding principles that we thought a little more important, because we received 16 requests and they were all great. They were all really good, but some were better than others. We had to make a decision. So we really wanted to focus on demonstrating the benefit to Pelhamites. It is the citizens' money, and we wanted to make sure there was benefit for them. We wanted to make sure the charities had a genuine need. An organization, not to punish an organization that's fiscally responsible, but there are some organizations that had some money in the bank, and there were others that were just scraping by. So we wanted to make sure that we were funding those that needed it the most. And we also wanted the organizations to demonstrate transparency. We'll get to it when we go through some of the evaluations, but some of the balance sheets weren't great. Some organizations didn't respond to our questions, and we wanted to be able to feel good that the money that we were giving them was being used effectively, and that's what we did. So now's the fun part. I'm going to move on to the grant recommendations. I really wanted to punch this part up, and I thought to myself, spirit of the season, I could bring myself my Grinch hat and my Santa hat, but I checked my references and they're the same hat, so I didn't think it would have quite the impact that I was looking for. Starting with, I'm going to go from the Grinch hat, the ones that we didn't fund, up to the ones that we funded fully. Starting with the Greater Niagara Model Railroad Engineers. They requested $3,000 for the replacement of the roof in their building in the town of Fenwick. The town owns that building. So Carrie has told us that she's going to look to fund that roof replacement through operating budget for the town. Really wasn't applicable to the grants. Now I'm going the other way. Welland Historical Museum, not funded. They requested $3,900 for 3 displays, 2 to be set up in the museum and 1 to be set up in the town hall. As we followed up on this request, the Welland Historical Museum hadn't made any contact with the town to see where we're going to put this display and what it was going to look like and what the artifacts were going to be. So they didn't do a lot of planning on the front end. We didn't feel like the project had a very good chance of success, especially because we were told there's no room at the inn here at the town hall for a display itself. So we did not accept that request. Hospice Niagara requested $2,000 to initiate a day hospice program. It's a service that's needed in South Niagara, but this is one that didn't demonstrate the benefits to Pelhamites. The request really talked about South Niagara, Port Colborne, Fort Erie, all the way up to Pelham. There was no guarantee where the hospice was going to be, how it was going to be located so that Pelhamites could get to it. They didn't demonstrate a genuine need. This is an organization with a $5 million budget. We didn't really think that our $2,000 was going to make or break them. United Way of South Niagara. This is one hit home close to us. Sheila actually helped initiate the 211 phone service in Ontario. If you don't know what it is, you're not alone. It is a multilingual service to help newcomers, people who just moved to an area, find medical government services for them. And the United Way of South Niagara was looking for $5,000 to advertise that service. Sheila did some research, we did some research. It's 2015. Nobody's calling 211 anymore. Even in their application, the United Way said that 1 person last year used the service. So it's not something that's needed and needs a little money to get over the hump. It's just something that people aren't using. So 1, $5,000 is quite a lot for posters and whatever else they're going to do. And 2, that we really didn't see a benefit for it. And the United Way is quite well funded as well.
No, it's not.
Julian School was tricky. We had a lot of discussion about it as a group. They requested $5,000 to fund a student bursary. What we weren't able to get out of them, so this is where we got into our standing kind of rules of engagement here. We reached out to them with some questions. They didn't respond to our requests, so we weren't sure. We weren't sure where the money was going. How much of that $5,000, is it funding 1 student for a year? Is it funding 5 students for a year? Are any of their students, how many of their students are Pelhamites? We weren't able to get any of that information, so we chose to pass on this request. And now we switch hats. Pelham Cares requested $5,000 to fund a volunteer medical transportation program. We were able to fund $1,300 and almost $50 of it. Pelham Cares is a great organization, and I think it speaks to the people of Pelham that it is very well funded. It's got more food than it needs from food drives, and we're able to share into other communities. Its assets are growing year over year. So again, we wanted to reach out and support them. We didn't think that the $5,000, we weren't able within the budget to meet the $5,000, but we were able to meet 1,300 and almost 50 of it. Fond Hill and District Kinettes, we funded 50% of their request, and this goes together with the Kinsmen, which is the next slide. They wanted the old Pelham Town Hall for their meetings, and this was just an in-kind request of rental fees. Looking at scheduling in the hall, they wanted 2 days a month, and the Kinsmen wanted 2 days a month, and then there was kind of a floating, it started to be a lot of time in the old Pelham Town Hall that the town wouldn't be able to rent it out and generate a little bit of revenue. So what we've asked is that the Kinsmen and Kinettes work together. We've just renovated Town Hall. There are now 2 rooms in it with plenty of room for everybody. We're hoping that they can condense their meetings and everybody meet at the same time. And if they can do that, we're recommended that it be funded. And if they can't, they're free to rent the hall out at their own cost. Kinsmen had a 2-part request. First was $2,000 in-kind rental fee for Pelham Arena for the home show. And then the second part was the rental fees for Old Pelham Town Hall for their meetings. We've recommended that we approve the request for the arena. The home show is an important event in Pelham. We want to see that proceed, and we ask that they share their meeting space with the Kinettes. Pelham Senior Citizens Association, this is an association I just want to point out that runs on $800 a year or some. This is a very fiscally responsible organization, so we were really impressed with this. They requested $4,250 for rental fees and cost offsets, including their liability insurance, and that is called out specifically because by policy we can't fund their liability insurance. So we have granted everything, recommended that we grant everything except the liability insurance just because we can't. Lions Club of Fenwick, $2,500 for in-kind rental fees for Centennial Park, or as at least my family calls it, the Lions Park. So we were very happy to grant this one. Biketoberfest, the Summer Carnival, the upcoming Santa Claus Parade are huge events for Pelham. I mean, they bring in a lot of people, they bring the community together, funded 100%. Fond Hill Lions Club, and these aren't together so that I can point out the parochialism involved in having a Fond Hill and a Fenwick Lions Club. They just happen to go that way. But they requested $3,500 for operation and maintenance costs for their park, playground, and tennis courts. We are happy to recommend this be accepted. Carrie will kill me if I don't mention that we are asking the Fond Hill Lions Club to be diligent about submitting their receipts and that the funds not be paid out until the receipts are submitted. The Bandshell Concerts, again, another huge organization, does great things for the town. They've requested $3,600 in cash and in-kind, subsidize their parking plan, help offset some of their costs. And we're happy to do it. We're happy to recommend that it get done. This is one where, in the future, I think we'd really like to see board-approved financial statements. We got an income and an expense. We didn't get to see what the bank balance looks like. We didn't get to see if it's growing or shrinking and how much the need was. Pelham Arts Festival. Pelham is an arts town. It's a big, important part of what we do. And they requested $3,900 for in-kind donation of arena rental fee for the art festival, and we are recommending that it be granted in full. Women's Place of South Niagara requested $4,000 to fund an office visit counseling project, and this will help alleviate some of the load of people just coming to shelters. They were very specific. Last year, 17 women from Pelham used their service. 4 of them moved into Women's Place shelters. They certainly is a need for this kind of service. It's not duplicated. It met all the criteria. And again, we're very happy to recommend this gets full funded 100%. The Legion, again, another organization, from the mayoral debates to hockey coaching clinics to bingo nights. They are reaching out, getting involved in the community, donating their space for community use. that puts a lot of wear and tear on their furniture and tables, and they've asked for $5,000 to help offset the cost of replacing some of that furniture because it's getting a little scrubby. We're recommending that this happen, and we're also recommending that they work with the town to take advantage of any better purchasing agreements that are in place with the town. In the Orchard, this is another one. This is an organization, really a kind of cornerstone for the arts in the town, an organization that reaches out not just to kids coming to their camps, but to Crosley students to come and staff them and to get their volunteer hours at them. They are out in the community quite a lot. And they've asked for $5,000 to help offset the cost of their camps and get some supplies. And we're happy to recommend that they get that. So we'll move on to the summary. That's all the requests. Here's how we did. 16 total requests. We were able to issue, or we're recommending we issue 11 grants, 69%. This is more grants than were given out in 2014, and the budget stays exactly the same as 2014. Some recommendations going forward. First, for the policy updates, and we touched on this as we went through the first cut of the requests. This is the first year for this policy, so we're taking our chance to give you some feedback. Really would like to see the board approve financial statements, income, expense, and the balance sheets. It does help us when we're trying to determine who's really struggling and who the grant isn't going to affect. I think that should be really included in the policy up front. Bank balances is a little bit redundant of that, but for clarity, it's there. So again, we can see if this is growing or shrinking. At the application, proving the benefits to Pelhamites up front is hugely important. We had some great submissions, and it was a South Niagara submission or it was a Niagara submission, and we weren't able to determine how many Pelhamites who this is really helping, and that hurt some of the applicants. So if that can be spelled out a little more clearly in the policy, I think that would help them. And information, this was back to the discussion on the Julian School. It's a school for alternative learners. We weren't able to determine from their application, are they getting funding from the Ministry of Ed? Is there other funding opportunities available to them? And they didn't answer our questions. So, but again, if we spell that out clearly, that information on other funding sources be included, it will help future committees make the decision. And with that, I'd like to make a recommendation to council. I'd like to state that council recommend that the grant award of $38,200 be considered in the 2015 operating budget as follows in the table. And I won't read them out because I just spent 5 minutes going through all of them. And that's it for me, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Federico, for your presentation, and to all the committee members for your work on this. This is the first time for the policy, so thank you very much for spelling that out and making some policy suggestions as well. Questions from members of council? Councillor Papp, you
Through you,
want
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your presentation. Very thoroughly done. I do want to clarify a couple of things, and I say it with all due respect. United Way is not well funded, and the fact they're down $500,000 from the closure of many industries a few years ago. However, the service you were looking at, I'm very familiar with because I was associated with them in the past. And you're right, if there's only one person using it, then it's not something you should be considering. I'm curious, Mr. Federico, about the hospice care, because I am familiar with it, and the actual day hospice opened up in Welland, 1 day a week at the Knox Presbyterian Church. Was this a request to assist with that operation, or was it just a general request for funding of that particular day hospice?
Really came across as a general request, and I think
Request.
Yes, I think this is part of the learning that organizations are going to do with this policy. It was just a general, we would
General
like
request.
to fund a day hospice in South Niagara.
Okay, I think you're, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's important what you've noted, that those kinds of things have to be articulated and succinct so that we understand, because without, I guess, actually burdening, there will be people that will be in need of hospice care.
Absolutely.
I would say back that when you respond to them back, that they actually demonstrate that, in fact, there could be, and we know there are, I don't want to get into the numbers, people that have used those services at their service in St. Catharines. So it's helpful to clarify, and get that sort of impact statement very clear, so you as a committee need to know. And finally, Mr. Mayor, just as a matter of procedure, is it actually council recommending, or is it the grants committee recommending to council to consider? Is that the way I would read it?
Mr. CEO?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the grant
Committee.
committee recommending to council to
Okay.
include in the budget.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank
That's
you.
very well done.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. There may be more. Are there more questions, comments? Councillor Kersey, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, through you. You highlighted one particular applicant that didn't provide balance sheets. Were they the only particular one, or was that a general problem?
No, there were maybe one or two that didn't provide the balance
Didn't
sheets.
provide
In general, we got balance sheets from pretty much everybody.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay. That's fine.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Appreciate your work. And now we do have a motion. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley. The Committee of the Whole received the issue sheet submitted by the 2015 Municipal Grants Committee, and that the following grant awards totaling $38,200 be recommended to Council for approval. Pelham Cares, 1,340, maybe you could go back to the slide as I read through it. 1,344.14, Fawn Hill Cadets, 1783.48, Fawn Hill Lions, 2,500. Fenwick Lions, it says Fawn Hill here. Fenwick Lions, 2,500. Fawn Hill Lions, 3,500. Bandshell Concert Series, 3627.74. Pelham Seniors, 3695.61. Fawn Hill Kinsmen, 3849.04. Pelham Art Festival, 3,900. Women's Place, 4,000. Royal Canadian Legion, 5,000. And in the Orchard, 5,000. And that the policy updates as contained in the grant committee report be approved, and that staff be directed to incorporate policy updates to take effect for the 2016 Grants Committee. Good. Any other discussion on that motion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Federico.
Thank you.
And other members of the committee, and thank you for making your presentation. So what will happen, just to clarify further, Councillor Papp and the CAO's comment, this is a committee, so now council will consider this next Monday, but I wanted to let the public know.
Yeah,
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you. Next on our list is a presentation from the Pelham Public Library. Do they need help with their...
My tech staff is coming.
Oh, thank you. And Maxine Gaylor is here. She's going to be making a presentation as chair of the board. And would you like to introduce or ask people to wave if members of the library board and staff that are here?
I'm Maxine Gaylor, as you say, chair of the library board at the present time. That may change within a couple of weeks, as the library board will be appointed later on this month. And we have a few members of the library board here, and if you'd like to wave, or if you don't want anybody to know, that's fine. And we do have some of the staff here as well, helping, and our new CEO who will be starting after Christmas.
Hello, Mr. Weaver. Thank you for joining us as well, and staff.
And my backup is Amy Gilmet, who has been the acting CEO for the last year and a half, I believe, or a year and a few months. With your indulgence, I will be reading most of this because there are points I do not want to miss.
Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Augustine, members of council, town staff, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to present our 2015 operating budget request. The Pelham Public Library is more than a collection of books. It's a public place of sharing and experiencing. It's a community center, destination, and resource for self-directed lifelong learning. Expectations and service demands have evolved and placed pressures on our budgets. We've had to be responsive with the implications this will have on the resources required to keep our services in step with changing community needs and our library's high level of customer satisfaction. The library strives to maintain a balance between the increasing demand and cost to deliver vibrant and responsive service in our town, and the desire to present a budget that limits the impact on the taxpayer. Over the past 5 years, we have had both surpluses and deficits in our operating budgets, and the deficits depleted our reserves. At the end of 2013, even with the surplus in our operating budget, we still had a $50,000 debt. With the hard work and dedication of our staff, we delayed hiring one of our full-time administrative positions and operated at a crisis level for the 2014 year to repay this entire deficit. By the end of 2014, we estimate there will be a surplus not only in the balance of the 2014 operating budget, but also in the reserves. A comparison of our 2014 expenditures to those of 2012, we're using 2012 as it was the last year we had a full complement of staff. So in comparison, we've reduced our expenditures by 1.5% and increased our operating revenues by 6.3%. This has brought us to a balanced operating budget. We reduced expenditures by cutting hours, 5.5 at Fonthill and 18 at Maple Acre, reducing adult programming, and by not offering our staff a cost of living increase. Salaries were the only area left to cut, a situation that has not changed. In 2005, we were spending over $300,000 in the non-salary portion of the budget. At this time, we are spending less than $200,000 in the non-salaries at a time when the shift toward technology-driven services increases our costs. This year, the library was given a one-time allotment of $40,000 from the Town of Pelham's contingency fund. Thank you. During the year of 2014, it was the library's task to examine workflows and efficiencies to reduce future expenditures. The question that was asked was, can we afford the same high level of service with less staff by looking for efficiencies in workflow, staffing, and job descriptions? Library administration looked at workflow and tasks. The first priority is always our direct service to the public. As you step through the doors, how can we ensure that there's enough staff to help customers find what they need? Unfortunately, at the Fonthill location, we are greatly hampered with the current layout of the building. Since 1987, there hasn't been a space renovation to accommodate the growth in service and staff that has occurred. We examined a variety of options and variations on our staffing model. None of them offered significant savings opportunities without the need for significant and costly reconfiguration of the existing space. Library administration also spent a good deal of time examining and updating all of the job descriptions. None of these changes were significant enough to warrant a change in job equity. We didn't eliminate tasks or duties. We found that our staff was already doing a plethora of tasks with great efficiency. We then looked at how we use volunteers and the possibility of expanding their use. In 2013, we had over 200 volunteers put in more than 2,000 hours. Presently, we use volunteers for fundraising, the Books on Wheels program, the Gadget Clinic, and the interbranch delivery of books and materials. We often call on our volunteers when we need help for a program, and a large portion of our adult programming is conducted by volunteers. This is an area that evolves, and we will keep an eye out for tasks that volunteers will be able to help with in the future. The next table shows the library board's proposed expenditures for 2015. We anticipate an increase in expenditures of 2.36%, or in dollar figures, $20,826 from 2014. Let's go to the next slide as I go into the details for this increase. We do not anticipate adding any new permanent positions in 2015 or any added hours for current staff. We did, in fact, cut 5 hours from circulation staffing. But we do know that there will be increases due to movement through the grid, cost of living, hourly wages increases for our pages, and a portion of this increase in expenditures is the addition of $8,000 for 2 summer students. Federal grants in the revenue section of the budget will cover approximately 3/4 of the students' salaries. Our materials and processing fees will be increased. Our book vendors have already informed us there will be a 5% increase, mostly due to the value of the Canadian dollar versus the American dollar. Rising costs for our subscriptions have also been calculated into the expenditures. We plan to increase our transfer to capital by $2,000 to adequately fund estimated technology replacement costs on a 4 to 5 year cycle. We're projecting small reductions in utilities, administration, and programming costs. This table shows the library board's projected revenues for 2015. As you can see, we're proposing a balanced budget with a 2.36% increase in revenues based on 2014 year-to-date revenues. We anticipate the slight increases in fees, fines, rentals, and fundraising. Due to the nature of our current buildings, we do not anticipate room for growth in the collections and have therefore left out the DC funds in this initial proposal. We also received $40,000 from the town's contingency fund in 2014 to fund our regular operating expenditures while we examined our workflows for efficiencies. This is the requested increase in municipal contribution. As you can see, it looks high at 9.3% or approximately $70,000. However, if you account for the contingency fund contribution of $40,000 we received last year, we're actually asking for a 4% increase for 2015. If you include RDC funds from last year into the revenues, it is a 1.63% increase or $21,000. This request would meet our expected cost and are needed to maintain the same level of service and operating hours our residents have come to expect. The Canada Council for the Arts grant and Canada Student Job grants account for the increase in this line of the revenues. I've already talked about the loss of DC funds and the need to replace the amount given from the contingency fund. Therefore, the only way to present a balanced budget based on expected cost is to request an increase in municipal funding. Next, we need to look at the picture of what these increases mean to the library services in Pelham. The following slides represent some scenarios that the board has discussed and considered should council choose to restrict the 2015 budget. Each results in a service reduction and none are recommended by the board. If the library board were to lower their proposed 2015 municipal funding request by 4.26%, they would be reducing $32,065 from salaries and would have to shorten operating hours at the Fonthill branch by 10 hours. Maple Acre has the lowest visitor and circulation numbers in the system. However, the interest and feedback from Fenwick residents has spoken to their commitment in keeping Maple Acre open. Reducing weekly service by 10 hours at Fonthill would protect Maple Acre's current hours and ensure its continued operation for another year. As you can see in this table, an increase of 5.04% or $38,000 from the municipality would mean that staff salaries, our biggest expenditure, would need to be cut. Since we are at appropriate staffing levels now, this would directly result in cutting the hours we added in 2007 when we started opening on Mondays in Fonthill. What could this look like? Well, it might mean shortening our daily hours at Fonthill, opening at 11 and closing at 7, Monday through Thursday. Opening an hour later on Friday and closing an hour earlier on Saturday. Another option could look like this. Closing an hour earlier Monday through Thursday, closing all day Friday, and opening an hour earlier on Saturday. Maple Acre would shift to Wednesday and Friday hours, ensuring that the residents of Pelham had at least one location open on Fridays. If the library board were to lower their proposed 2015 municipal funding request by 6.1%, they would be reducing $45,905 from salaries and operating costs and would have to close the Maple Acre branch. This is a $25,000 reduction in expenditures from the 2014 budget. Without revenues to pay for the expected costs, there would be no choice for the library board but to close our smaller branch. With an anticipated new build and forecasted increases in operating a larger building, we hope the council will show their continued support to keep this location open. This, we hope, is our worst-case scenario. If the library board were to lower their proposed 2015 municipal funding request by 9%, they would be reducing $67,496 from salaries and operating costs and would have no choice but to close the Maple Acre branch and reduce 10 operating hours per week at the Fonthill branch. This represents a reduction of approximately $47,000 in expenditures from our 2014 budget and an increase of 0.33% from the municipality. What kind of impact does any kind of closure represent to the residents of Pelham? For each hour the library is open, Pelham residents come in to meet, interact, create, and study, borrow books and materials, attend programs, ask reference questions, and access the internet via workstation or Wi-Fi. To benefit from these programs and services, the library must be open. Specifically, how would fewer hours or closing a branch impact the residents of Pelham? Well, we have welcomed more than 125,000 visitors in 2013 and lent materials 147,000 times, more than 8 times for each resident of Pelham. We equalize access to information technology. The library is the most democratic of institutions, where people from all walks of life use resources side by side. In 2013, there were almost 16,000 uses of public computers to access the internet. Public members use this access, among other purposes, to find work, to apply to schools, to secure government benefits, and learn about critical medical treatments. For all of this, the Pelham Library cost approximately $45 per citizen each year to maintain, about the price of 2 adult fiction hardcover books. To close our doors even for 10 hours means fewer chances for our citizens to access these important resources and reduces our opportunities to impact early literacy. We have approximately 250 to 300 visitors on a typical Friday at the Fonta Library. Closing an hour early would mean about 20 or 30 visitors would be asked to leave or would find the doors locked as they tried to enter. Opening an hour later would be asking about 50 people to stop by later or not at all. Our library is a place of contact, community, and pride. We're moving beyond the concept of lending materials and now becoming a place of personal discovery and community. We deliver innovative adult programs that celebrate our culture and promote lifelong and self-directed learning. In 2013, we held over 250 adult programs and had over 3,800 participants involved in programs that include topics such as computer literacy, genealogy, history, book clubs, adult learning, culture, and seniors programming. Pelham Library contributes to the livability and quality of life in Pelham through responsive services that are used by a high percentage of the population. Our children's programs are designed to promote reading and creativity. In 2013, we held over 300 children and teen programs with almost 5,000 participants. The programs range from early literacy and learning to summer reading and homework help, and 37 visits to classrooms in the community. The library's promotion of literacy and reading is key to growing a town of readers and lifelong learners. With reduced staffing and operating hours, there will also be a reduction in the number of program offerings and outreach we can provide. Our promotion of literacy and other services are important supports for Pelham's economy by contributing to factors that increase competitiveness and prosperity. Supporting your public library and our request for an increase in our municipal contribution means maintaining equal access to information and technology for all residents of Pelham. Reducing services, we risk isolating those residents who walk to our library to use our public computers or read our local newspapers. By supporting the funded request of the Pelham Public Library, the town will be supporting the directions from the Niagara Region Culture Plan of 2012. Those are strengthening cultural resources in the creative culture sector to maximize their contribution to economic development, and encouraging participation in culture across the Niagara community to stimulate innovation, creativity, and engagement. By supporting the library increase, Council will be investing in their own cultural plan. Strategic Direction 1.4 calls for support for growth in cultural programming. With the current decision over funding for the library in 2015 hanging in the balance, we're at risk of reducing our cultural programming. In 2013, we had 67 adult and senior programs that focused on culture with over 900 participants. Every reduced operating hour at the Fonta location reduces the time that local artists' work can be viewed at the Festival Room Art Gallery. Pelham Public Library was identified in the Cultural Plan as a key facility of cultural space. Please help us guarantee that this resource keeps its doors open at least as much as in 2014. Supporting our library means supporting the town of Pelham's strategic planning goals and objectives. We help Pelham meet the following objectives from their most recent strategic plan. Goal 1, Objective 1, provide services and programs that are non-discriminatory. Goal 1, Objective 2, ensure fair and equitable compensation and treatment of staff. I've heard objections that library staff are overpaid, but our salaries were evaluated by job equity, and this compensation directly resulted in our increased ratio of salary to non-salary expenses. Goal 2, Objective 2, promote Pelham's culture, quality of life. Goal 4, Objective 1, decide and implement the right recreational and cultural services and facilities now and in the future. Goal 5, Objective 2, provide exceptional service to all residents and businesses. In our last community survey, having had over 400 respondents, 90% of the respondents rated services by staff as excellent. And Goal 5, Objective 3, become a culturally vibrant community. Here are a few quotes from the Pelham residents who visited our booth at this year's Summerfest and finished the sentence, "I love my library because," you can read them yourself. It's like going on a mini vacation in your own backyard. We believe that the current level of service is appropriate to the needs of the town today. The Pelham Public Library has been responsive to the community's needs and has been a contributing factor in enhancing the quality of life in our town. Please allow us to continue with the same services by supporting our request for an increased contribution to our operating budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, and town staff for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your presentation. Appreciate that, and I wonder if members of council have any questions for Ms. Gale. Very comprehensive
Oh, really?
report, so thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if we'll have a copy of that.
Certainly.
We
You're
appreciate
looking
this
for the
fullness,
additional commentary?
Yes, please.
Is that possible?
I think Ms. Bizzatto has it, or will have
I
it.
sent one earlier today, of a copy of the presentation. So.
Okay, perfect. So we have the presentation. I think what the councilor is looking for is your comments that you read.
Yeah, I sent
That's
them
it.
today.
Okay,
Good.
So
thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam
Chair.
Clerk? Okay.
I was out of the office this afternoon in a meeting, but I will forward them.
Can they be attached to the minutes? Okay, so maybe we'll attach them to the minutes as well so that others can have that great understanding. Thank you. Others? Councillor Pat?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, very comprehensive, and we appreciate, and I've always appreciated what you've done and the work, particularly as it relates to the impact that it has on our cultural side of our town. This budget that you're recommending, has this been approved by the board? You're
The
recommending
proposals, the
yeah.
proposals that we have put forward have all been recommended by the board.
All right, thank you. That's all I need to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Just along the same lines, I see, you mentioned earlier, Mr. Weaver's in the audience, the new CEO. So he doesn't officially start until, I think it's the 5th of January. So it's really Ms. Guillemette that's
Yes, it is.
formulated from the staff side, is that correct?
Yes,
Just for
it is.
council's understanding.
Yeah, so we understand what.
Yes, and I do want to thank her for the excellent presentation that she's put together and the research and the facts that we've been able to present.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay,
for your presentation. Really appreciate it and the hard work you've all put into that. So it has been moved by Councillor Junkin, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that the municipal funding request for the 2015 library operating budget be received, and that the proposed library operating budget for 2015 be referred to the treasurer for inclusion in the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. Comments or questions regarding this? The question that did come to my mind, and I think this is for the CAO, one of the things that council directed that staff and we're hopeful that the library board were working on is what I would call, for lack of a better word, a service agreement. I think we had thought that it would be sort of done through 2014. Can we just get an update on that service agreement, if that's what we call it, Mr. CAO?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the operating agreement, if you will, is something that has been discussed with the staff of the library and the staff of the town. A framework has been developed, and council should expect to see something early in the new year.
I don't know about councillor colleagues, but it may help formulate our consideration of the budget to look at that, what that operating agreement would look like, or that framework. I think of things like the contingency fund that was mentioned in terms of supporting technology, and then there's other capital items that may or may not be required, and you know, whose responsibility is that? So, Mr.
We
CAO,
can
and-
certainly respond, Mr. Mayor, with an overview of the framework, if that would help in the deliberation. That's not a problem.
I think it'd be helpful, I don't know what council colleagues think about that, about getting at least an understanding of what the framework looks like, a draft to us, and that we can consider to move forward, so. Councillor Papp, anything on that?
It'd be very helpful, because what I just heard is that, you know, the budget's been approved, and shortly thereafter, we're going to hear our budget approval. So my question is, maybe it's a little premature, through you, Mr. Mayor. This amount, request, Mr. CEO and Madam Treasurer, is it included in the projections that will be provided later this evening? That it's not?
No, it's not.
It's not. Okay, so it'd be helpful to have
Okay.
that service agreement to see how it fits into what we're trying to achieve fiscally.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Sorry, it's time for council, unless Mrs. Gale, or you'd like
Ms.
to,
Gale, if you could,
go ahead.
It's just if I may.
Please.
please.
Mr. Ottaway was mentioning the agreement. We have not seen that as yet.
Either's council.
Neither's council. So,
Well, but I thought it was to be.
it is, it is.
Through the board.
Mr. CEO, maybe you can comment on that, the
Yeah.
process for approval, et cetera?
The completed draft hasn't been seen by the library board or the council. The framework has been discussed with staff, both from the library and from the municipality.
So it's still at the staff level. Maybe the CEO will follow up tomorrow with library staff. Mr. CEO? Okay, thank you. Anything further, Councillor, Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that service agreement too. It seems to me that it's going to be very difficult for us to consider a budget if it isn't built around a set of definitions of what it is we're trying to achieve through the library system. And I think that's what's articulated ultimately in that agreement. So knowing what that is and having a firm grip on that, I think will make it really easy for us then to move to the next step, which is to look at the budget and deal with it as in the light of that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I see some puzzled looks out there. How much involvement did library staff have in the preliminary draft work from coming in on this?
On the service or operating agreement?
Yeah.
Mr. CEO?
We've had a couple of meetings. The last meeting we had several weeks ago with the acting librarian, acting CEO rather, and we went through and discussed where the separation of responsibilities would be. We discussed operating requirements, the way that the lease could be looked at, and then putting that into a formal policy language is what we're currently undertaking now.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that coming forward as well.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. So the motion is to receive it and to refer it for inclusion in the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again for the presentation. Next, we have Trish Ripsky, representing the Thorold Fonthill High School Time Capsule Restoration Project.
Thank you, everyone.
That are moving out, so.
It's a revolving door.
And moving in. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Hold on. We're,
Just
okay.
maybe bear with us
Yeah,
for a
wait.
second here as.
Okay. Put it, no, I'll put it up here so everyone can see it. We're going low tech here. Okay.
I think we're good. Thank you very much. And if you wouldn't mind introducing your colleagues, thank you.
Yes, I'm Trish Rivsky. This is John Jupian, Heritage Resource Consultant. Joe Albanese, who is our archivist and creator of website for Thorold Fonthill High School, which many of you do not know about. It is presently Glen A. Green Public School, but back from 1959 to 1970, it was a high school. And I apologize, we're low tech here. But,
That's okay. Thank you.
Can you,
Maybe if you.
yeah. I want to thank you, Mayor Augustine and members of council. If you can see this, this is the present-day Glen A. Green School, and I wonder how many of you know what this is. Looks like a septic tank. What it is, it is a piece of history for what was then the town of Fonthill, population 2,800 at the time.
For those of you who were around for the centennial, it was a chance for Canadians to really celebrate being Canadians. And one of the things that we did at the school, we are all alumni of the school, and I know there are other alumni here. We built a time capsule. The land around it has been deeded to the town should there ever be widening. It was meant to be a legacy for citizens of the future, to be opened in 2067. At the time, if you're familiar with Canada's centennial flag, this was the original structure and the plans, and actually that design was patented by Bruce Slater, who was the industrial arts teacher, and students created it. What has happened over the years is the structure has crumbled. It no longer resembles the Canadian centennial flag that it was meant to be. In fact, I was called by the school, and Joe was as well, to say, what is this we heard about a time capsule? They found some documents there. Like I said, this is what it looks like now. John, who has a long list of credentials, has arranged to have this restored by being covered with copper-lined lead to restore it to what it used to look like. Really important. We want this to be a landmark for the town of Pelham and a piece of history. We are asking the town, John has donated his services. We do have estimates from the Whitesmith. The total cost of the project, we're looking at $15,000. Our efforts to raise funds started 3 years ago when we had a booth at the Crosley reunion. We've raised about $3,000 so far. We did have a small contribution from one of the superintendents at the board, and the rest has come through alumni, through trying to reach people through Facebook and other sources. So considering in 1970 when the school closed, there were 300 students, we've done quite well to try to track down some people. We do want to stress, though, that right now this eyesore does not look very good. And John's sort of plans for it, and we have a model here. You have to visualize that it's not going to look like pebbled concrete, but where's this will be, we basically are going to encapsulate this present structure, and this is what it's going to look like. So it will look like the centennial flag. It will be three-dimensional in its pyramid-like structures. And we are going to have a plaque identifying it. That is the one thing. We never had anything identifying it. We are offering all donors over $100 will be acknowledged at certain levels. One of the histories of the school, we had a house system. There was alpha, beta, and gamma houses. So we have designated different levels of acknowledgement. So should the town participate in the restoration of this project, we are really hoping, that we definitely will be acknowledging you at a much higher level than we're offering the alumni and their contributions. I do want to point out, and we would like this project done for the 150th anniversary coming up in 2017, and a report of Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage has acknowledged that in 1967 there were a number of projects, and Minister Rob Moore pointed out that many projects from 1967 are in need of renovations, and he is quoted as saying, it wouldn't exactly be a great 150th celebration to have the infrastructure from the 100th celebration falling apart, and that seems to be what we have here in town. We would ask that the town, presently we are $12,000 short of our target. We are looking to the town for a contribution. I haven't set an exact amount because I am not sure what other sources of funding could be received. But once again, we want to stress that this can become part of the town and hopefully a landmark for the town that we don't have too much of. If you have questions for...
Can I summarize this whole thing very quickly?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Jupian.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention, council. We came here this evening because we worked for 3 years to try to restore the centennial symbol, which was the only symbol of the Canadian centennial that really existed here in Fawn Hill. It was a landmark when it was built, as was the howitzer that once stood on the juncture of Church and Highway 20, the Legion used to have. Now we have a nice arch, which we drove through to come here today. But over the years, due to maintenance and the concerns of the school board, what once looked like the centennial symbol, like this, deteriorated due to maintenance, and it does, I think Trish referred to it as a cistern or a septic tank. Indeed, it does look like that. So what we've designed to do here is to build a lead-coated copper image, which is maintenance-free. Lead-coated copper is used on roofing often on heritage buildings. It's guaranteed to last over 100 years. And by recontouring, could you hold up the model, Joe? This is a scaled model we made of the recontoured encapsulation, which is in lead-coated copper. It would be a metallic thing that would be sitting in a 4-foot footing, which would anchor it in place. It would be maintenance-free. It would be an element that would harken back on our efforts. I was there in 1967 as one of my colleagues when it was unveiled. We had quite a big ceremony at the time. And we're just concerned in bringing some aesthetics back to Fawn Hill and building something, or actually restoring something that was once here, that was a landmark, and leaving it as a legacy for the upcoming celebrations of the Canadian. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. I can discuss what we plan to do in terms of how this goes together technically, but just that's a general overview of what we have planned. It is a $13,000 project, and to date we have about $3,000. So we're coming with cap in hand to council, hoping that we can find some help in bridging the void financially so that we can carry on with this project.
Thank you very much. I think it was 15 you said, is that correct?
We had to allow for the plat of 15,000 total.
I see.
My
Okay.
mistake.
Okay.
We have the quote from the whitesmith.
Okay.
Certainly, at this point, we could, if council had further questions concerning the details, we could provide them, but
Okay.
I didn't think that's...
Let's see what council thinks. So thank you very much for your presentation. Questions from members of council? Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the interest of full disclosure, I too am a graduate of Thorold Fonthill High School. It was in my search for a place to get an education. Thorold Fonthill finally accepted me, and I did manage to graduate grade 13 in 1967 at the time of this capsule. So I do have some interest in this. Let me just get some clarification. I think, Ms. Dribsky, you talked about the land having been deeded to the town. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
There was a provision, there's a document in the school, and I don't want to give you the wrong information, but there was a deed, and I'm not sure to whom the land was deeded. I would assume at the time it was the town of the village of Fonthill in Pelham Township. So I'd have to really get that document.
Thank you. It'd be useful to have that because, of course, if that monument is sitting on town's land, it may give us some additional opportunity to think about your request.
And if you are able to direct us to any other heritage funding that we could look at, but,
I think probably someone in the organization can, yeah.
and I did not repeat what I had said in my initial sort of history, because I understand that you all read that. Yes.
We did.
In my personal interest, I have a letter in there. I was on student council and was asked to write a letter to citizens of the future about what I thought life would be like in 100 years.
There's a time capsule
Yeah.
on the inside, which
Yeah.
apparently is still there.
Yeah, and
In the
yes,
system.
and I think the first thing I said was I didn't think that the village of Fonthill would remain a small community it is today. That it would probably amalgamate with surrounding towns. So,
And that happened, but 3 years later.
yes. Are there
Any other questions? Sir? Councillor Powell?
So, thank you for your presentation, through Mr. Mayor. So the request is what? So we're clear. You're asking for 12,000, or you're asking for an undetermined amount to fund? I just want to be, so it could help us.
Yes.
Because what I'm trying to drive you to the other point is that the bottom line is to look that you would like to see this restored for the 150th,
Yes.
right?
That's
So that's like 2 years from now, roughly. So I just want to be clear. Mr. Mayor, can you help me?
Well, at this point, we would like to ask you for the $12,000 or whatever part of that you are able to allot us.
Toward, and forgive me, Mr. Mayor, towards capital construction, the cost of constructing it?
Yes.
Okay. That's important. We need to know what the request is.
And I should add that the funds collected are being administered by the District School Board of Niagara. It is not us individually taking this money, so that they are allowed to issue the tax receipts. Now, I don't know if that will impact the type of funding we can get. We thought it gave us a little more legitimacy.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm going to just answer
Go
that,
ahead, go.
Councillor Powell. We tend to do that for community
Yeah, we
groups
do
as
that
well.
as well.
That, and then we are able to issue tax receipts, so that we're used to that from the other side of that.
So it isn't just us three asking for the money.
Right.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we're kind of clear, and you're right, Mr. Mayor, we'll find out, we need to find out too whether that property is our property or it's part of the school property, and my colleague here, Councilor Kersey's probably right, it could have been part of a road allowance. It may have been, but we'll get that straight legally to see where it sits.
I can get that information, to whom should I report?
Probably
To the clerk, I
To the
think, or
clerk.
CEO. To Nancy?
See, okay,
Yeah.
I'll get that information
Okay.
for you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Junkin?
Realizing that public money is public money, have you tried the federal approach? Seeing as that was a centennial project, was it not?
It was a centennial project initiated locally.
So I just wondered if there was any funds available from the federal government, or have you looked at that?
We haven't looked at it at this point. We're just sort of investigating other opportunities of funding, and then I became aware of the 150th Heritage Committee, so I definitely will look into that. We've also approached the Pelham Historical Society, who are going to give it some consideration as well, since this is going to be, it's a historical landmark.
Certainly, if I could just comment quickly, the centennial, the 150th anniversary of the centennial is fast approaching, and I think all communities will be avidly looking for centennial projects to celebrate that. There will be federal funding available. If those announcements have been made yet, I'm unaware of them, but perhaps this would provide some incentive for a Fonthill or a Pelham-oriented project towards the centennial over the next couple of years. And I think at this point, in our endeavors, that's all that we can hope for.
Okay.
So we wanted to enlighten council regarding our efforts here and see what resources were available. And we thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Junkin, anything further?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. The school board, there's no funding from the school board, they're just,
We did meet with the school
We-
board. We did get a small.
We have
amount.
received $500 from Wes Hahn, one of the superintendents.
Okay, you mentioned
And I
that.
think that came from his discretionary budget.
okay.
But as far, and we're working, Dale Robinson, trustee.
Yes.
The trustee is also
Very
sort of
good.
helping us in whatever way we can. Shortly, you'll see a banner going across the structure saying restoration project in progress. So, and we're continuing to ask for donations.
One other quick question. Is the structure, you're saying it may not last the next 50 years, but will it last another year or something?
Indeed,
yes,
indeed. What is left there is a cement capsule, and it would last probably another 100 years. However, it's unidentifiable as
Yes.
to its form, and when it was put together, you know, it was a symbolic, physical representation. That's from the photograph, you can
Yes.
see, you know, exactly the condition it's in currently. It's unidentifiable.
Okay.
It's actually ugly.
Yes.
It is an entrance.
Thank you for calling a spade a spade.
Robinson Road and South Pelham, so we're hoping we're offering an aesthetic, something of aesthetic appeal here.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like there's some other questions that have to be answered in terms of the, whose property is it on? Is it on or near the road allowance? Those kind of things, whether there's some funding from upper levels of government that might be available. So thank you very much for your presentation, for answering all our questions, and for your dedication to this. We appreciate it. It has been moved by Councillor Kersey, seconded by Councillor Junkin, that the municipal funding request regarding the Thorold Fonthill High School time capsule restoration project be received, and that the request be referred for inclusion into the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. Any other comments, questions from members of council? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we add a direction to that motion directing staff to explore the possibilities of upper tier grants for this type of project?
Okay, yes, we could.
Thank
So
you.
you'd like to make that?
I would. Along those lines,
To investigate
upper tier.
potential grants from federal upper tier governments?
Yes.
Okay.
Along those lines, Mr. Mayor, perhaps we not just limit our look at it being a heritage project, but perhaps look at it as being public art. For example, I think the region has some funds available for public art, and that may be a source that we can tap into.
They do.
And do some matching, similar to our CIP program.
Okay. So I've just added federal, provincial, and regional.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a seconder for that direction, Councillor Papp? Any comments to the amendment? There being none, I call the question on the amendment, which is the direction. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. And now further discussion to the motion as amended. Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder whether further direction can be given to staff as well to consider a model of some sort of matching funding so as not to discourage others, as many others as possible, to contribute to this project. And we would consider that as the manner in which we might make our contribution.
Okay. So, Councillor, you're recommending
That staff put together for us to consider some model of matching funding, so that we've been asked today, or the figure that was suggested today was the full amount, and I'm suggesting that we do allow others to have as much opportunity as possible to contribute, both in terms of the funds that we've talked about a moment ago, but also privately, and let us contribute by matching what we can.
essentially directing staff to speak to our presenters and
Oh, that sounds great.
and develop a potential model for funding. Is that,
Perfect.
Is that
Exactly what I said. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Papp. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Any further discussion or amendments? There being none, I call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again for your presentation, and we look forward to hearing back from staff on those two items and working together with you on this. Thank you. Next, our presenter is E. Clark, representing the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I passed someone on the street today and they said, "Oh, there you are. There's the lady in charge of walking in Pelham." Yeah, okay. That was fun. I want to thank you very much for allowing me to present the Pelham Active Transportation Committee's 2015 budget request tonight. Obviously, I'm here on behalf of the committee. You have a copy of this request, and it includes ongoing improvements for pedestrians, tools to assist the committee in its work in the community, and a request for a commitment to establish an active transportation master plan for Pelham. Let me start with the big ticket item first, and that's the active transportation master plan. This is a request that we have made to council in previous years. It has been deferred, but hopefully our time has come. We really believe that Pelham must state its vision for active transportation and develop a long-range plan to achieve this vision in our community. An active transportation master plan would assess our current assets and create that vision through input and consultation. What would the active transportation master plan address? Number one, a connected community. We are hearing from residents concerns about the fact that we're experiencing growth in Pelham and they want to ensure that our communities, our villages, our neighborhoods remain connected. An active transportation plan would go a long way to ensuring we have that vision for connectivity in our community. It would include an outline or description of the network of sidewalks, trails, bike lanes, both on and off-road, that we currently have and that we see our community having in the future. We want to ensure, after all, we are all pedestrians here, and we want to ensure that our citizens and our
Ms. Clark,
residents of
excuse me.
Pelham can
Madam
move through
Treasurer,
the
could you
community.
I'm sorry, could you ask those in the hallway to just perhaps move? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Go
We
ahead.
want to ensure that our citizens can move throughout our community from neighborhood to neighborhood, area to area, village to village. This is particularly important, and we've been hearing it, as I've mentioned, from residents as we consider the East Fonthill development and the expansion in other neighborhoods in Fenwick and, for example, on North Haste. Secondly, the active transportation master plan would provide a blueprint for us. It would allow us to phase in improvements and additions to our sidewalks and trails, both on and off road. It would allow us to plan for those improvements and budget for those improvements over time. We certainly wouldn't expect a master plan to be developed and everything to be implemented within a year or so. It might be a 20-year master plan that would create that vision of our community. It will also help us, we know, as funding becomes available from the federal and provincial government, we need to have things ready in the planning stage to maximize funding opportunities. For example, with the centennial activities coming up in a couple of years, we understand that there will be funds for trail improvements across Canada, and we certainly want to take advantage of that here in Pelham. Thirdly, we know that the master plan would allow us to respond to emerging needs and trends. There's a growing demand for active transportation in communities and cities, not just in Canada, but around the world. And there are many reasons for that. Health is one. People want to stay active, want to stay in their homes, want to stay healthy. Safety is another. We want to move about our community and have a safe and active community, as you would agree, I'm sure. Bicycling and walking are a mode of transportation. Not everyone in Pelham owns a car. There are many individuals who move about by foot or by bicycle because they can't drive or they can't afford a car, or that's their only mode of transportation. And I think we need to be respectful of that. Others choose to walk and cycle for environmental reasons, and I know you're very aware of that. And still others know that pedestrians and cyclists boost the economy, the local economy, by patronizing local businesses and small businesses in particular. The mayor and I were at a presentation last week, and we heard that communities with higher walkability scores, which you can check out on any real estate website, the higher the walkability score, the higher the home values. And I think it was 4 or 5% that the home values increase as a result of a walkable or more walkable community. So I know we're ready to develop the active transportation master plan in Pelham. Staff and the committee have been working very hard in preparation for this, and part of it has been our application to walk-friendly and bike-friendly, share the road and the walk-friendly I've just lost the name of it, Green Canada, I believe it was, that awarded our walk-friendly designation to us last week. And in preparation for those awards, we've done a lot of work, staff has done a lot of work, and so I know we're well prepared to take on a master plan. The plan would provide that additional guidance that we require, and while I can't give you an exact figure on what it will cost, it's likely to be in the range between $25,000 and $50,000, depending on how we scope the actual RFP for that plan. Our second request is for additional benches. We're hearing from residents that particularly as activity increases on Highway 20 between Hayes Street and Lookout, there is more pedestrian activity, and we expect even more so as the sidewalks are finished off in that area. And we know from residents and from pedestrians in Pelham that one of the key amenities that that pedestrians look for are benches, a place to sit and rest during their travels. Now, some business people in Pelham are taking up that cause, and for example, Bogio Parton Pharmacy has added a bench and a bike rack, and we really applaud that and like to see that in our community. But we do think that we require some additional benches along that stretch between Haste and Lookout, and we're looking for some support for that. We're proposing 4 benches. They cost between $1,200 and $1,500 fully installed, and we hope that we can provide 4 benches in that stretch. And then finally, the committee is asking for a very modest amount, about $2,500, to support some of the work that the committee does throughout the year. We engage residents and citizens and business people in a variety of ways, in a variety of events. And to do that, we need little things like rat cards and newsletters and ongoing promotional materials that the town has been very supportive of in the past. We also try to stay abreast of any developments in the field of active transportation. Very often we volunteer our own time to attend a conference or a meeting, whether it's in the region or outside the region, and we're just looking for some support for that. And we've estimated that to be no more than $2,500. So that is our request for 2015, and I appreciate your attention this evening. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them for you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks again for being part of receiving the Walk Friendly Community Award last week, the bronze, and I know that there's a lot of work that you put into it and members of the Active Transportation Committee put into that, and on the ongoing work that you put in. So thank you very much on behalf of Council. I wonder if councillors have any questions regarding the presentation we just received. I was asking the CAO about this. In the minutes that are also part of the report that we received, it talks about the staff that are working on a multi-disciplinary way, I guess, how they're working on an active transportation master plan. You made reference to it, and maybe we can just hear about what the funding is for in addition to what the staff is doing. So the staff have essentially provided the foundation for it, is that correct? And then we need to move to the next level?
Correct. As I understand it, and I could certainly stand to be corrected, we would engage a consultant to actually help us develop the process of community engagement and discussion about what that vision of Pelham would be with respect to active transportation. We've actually already assessed our assets. We've had to do that as part of the application process for the walk-friendly and the bike-friendly applications.
Okay.
So we have a good sense of that already, and staff have been instrumental in pulling all of that information together.
Okay, perfect. That helps provide the clarity. That was the linkage on that. And then the quantum, I think, I'd ask the CAO. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're understanding the amount would be $33,000 for that exercise.
Okay. 33,000, is that the amount that you had stated? Okay. That's the budget. Anything further? All right, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it, Ms. Clark. And it has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Junkin, that the municipal fund request submitted by the Pelham Active Transportation Committee be received, and that the request is outlined in the October 29, 2014 submission be referred for inclusion in the 2015 budget for Council's consideration at a future date. Any further discussion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you again for your ongoing work and for your presentation this evening. Thank you. Next, we move to the Heritage Pelham budget outline. And I saw Mr. Schultz. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Schultz, the chair of the Heritage Pelham Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm Mark Schultz. I'm the chair of the Pelham Heritage Committee. I understand there's a slight change to the budget request from what I have compared to what you've seen. Our budget request was $10,000, and I understand it's been increased to $12,500, and I'm not going to object to an increase in our budget.
Okay.
But
as I said to the treasurer before the meeting, everyone's here and everyone is asking for a decrease in the budget. So anyways, you're not, so go ahead.
If you're offering me an increase, I'll take it. The Pelham Heritage Committee, the Municipal Heritage Committee was a resurrection of LACAC. There was a bylaw, 2010, a bylaw was passed to establish the committee. And in 2011, this council, with the exception of our newly minted Councillor Junkin, approved a request for proposal for a heritage master plan. And Carl Bray Consultants were hired at the not inconsiderable sum of almost $90,000 to produce the heritage master plan. The final report came to council in August 2012. And via a resolution, council endorsed the Heritage Master Plan. There were some important actions given high priority in the Heritage Master Plan. There was an inventory template to evaluate properties in the town of Pelham and to establish a heritage register. There was some existing inventories which needed to be consolidated. That was given a high priority. So we've been trying since then to move forward, but because of some changes in staff and so on, some unfortunate misinformation that was gotten out, we've been struggling with some of these things, but we're still trying to move forward with that. So just to run through our budget request, the first item, purchase of printed materials for a resource library of $1,000. Our bylaw says that we will be a resource for the public to help them understand the value of their heritage properties and to be able to evaluate some themselves. So this would be some printed materials, books, brochures and so on for the use of committee members and also for the use of the general public, just to educate them as far as the value of our heritage resources. The design of a plaque and production of plaques, the budget says for 10 existing designated properties. We actually only have 5 in town of Pelham, but we're anticipating designating some more. We have designed the plaque. We've gotten it approved. So the $1,500 is actually for production of 10 plaques. That would be a bronze plaque. That is your, I'm sure you've seen them in other municipalities on designated buildings. We've gone with a single design without a name or a date so that it's a generic plaque can be used. It's much cheaper to produce. It can be used on every property. It's your badge of honor to have a designated place and to be able to show it off. So the $1,500 that we're asking for, that would produce 10 plaques, which would last us quite a while at the rate we're going. That's a fairly modest cost for bronze plaques. Conferences and continuing education for members, $350 per member or $3,000. A lot of municipalities either give a stipend to their Heritage Committee members or they pay people to do the research to designate properties. We don't do that in Pelham, at least not yet. And so we have some very good and eager and well-intentioned members of the committee, but education never hurts anybody, and some of us need more than others. The $350 is about the cost of one seminar or one conference per year. So that would be one per member of the committee. That's what we're asking for. Printed materials for a driving, bicycle, walking tour, which kind of ties into what we just were hearing about, $2,500. We have a, part of the Heritage Master Plan was promotion of Pelham for tourism, promoting us, trying to attract people to the town, which is an economic driver to bring people in, have them spend money. We have a subcommittee who has developed 3 tours, driving, bicycle, and walking tour, highlighting heritage aspects in Pelham. The $2,500 we're asking for would be for the development of an actual brochure and map for each of those. That would be artwork, so on, and the printing cost of them so that they could be distributed, because it isn't much good for us to come up with this plan if we don't share it with anybody. Now, the establishing bylaw says that our recording secretary will be contracted for us to come to committee meetings, take minutes, produce the minutes, and circulate them, and so on. That's always been done with a staff member, and it's our understanding it was to be a staff member. And this is where I understand there's been an addition to the budget of a request for $2,500. I'm not sure if that means that the staff member is going to get overtime for doing this, or if we're hiring somebody new for this, but at any rate, it is very important that we have someone to do this, because as volunteers, it is difficult to get everything done that you're supposed to get done by the next meeting. It's very important to have a staff member who can produce the minutes for us and circulate them and remind us when the next meeting's coming up, because some of us have plenty of meetings to go to. Along with that, there's staff time to assist members who are trying to access municipal documents when researching properties. That's we don't have a dollar figure on there, because that's actually would be done during staff time. It's simply granting us permission to use some staff time at the municipality for this sort of thing, which is, in other municipalities, people are being paid to do this. So if we have volunteers who are trying to do some of these things, and we can get a little staff time to help with it, that would really assist us in what we're trying to get done. Full title searches are very difficult to do for someone who doesn't do them regularly. We've asked for $500 to do full title searches. A title search can cost $75 or $100. Someone who knows how to do it can do it very quickly for that kind of money. Someone who doesn't know how to do it can spend all kinds of time and not do it properly and not accomplish anything. So that $500 would be the cost of complete search on 4 or 5 properties probably for a year. And the final item, which kind of got chucked in here because we inherited it, transfer information from 2 microfiche boxes which contain the minutes of all of the council meetings for Pelham from 1850 to 1945, transferring them onto computer disk, and an estimate of $500 for that. That is valuable information which we shouldn't lose. We should have it recorded. The Pelham Historical Society doesn't have the resources to do this, so we're asking that through the Heritage Committee we can find the resources to do this, because that's, you know, you never know. Maybe you guys would like to have a look and see how they did it before. Any questions?
Maybe.
I think just to that last point, I was looking for that when we had our inaugural last week and opened Old Pelham Town Hall. It would have been interesting to read some minutes from some of those meetings, so thank you for that. Thank you for your presentation. Questions from members of council to Mr. Schultz? Councilor Pat?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the request is $12,500?
That's what I understand. Is yes, when I came here, I thought it was 10, but
Okay, so
but the $2,500 is actually staff time. So I'm not sure how that would be accounted for separately from.
Okay.
So somebody, a member of staff recommended that that be included. Maybe we can hear from them. Mr. Glover or Madam Treasurer? Mr. Glover?
The amount was included just for council's consideration. Currently, the staff member are doing this work. In the current bylaw, it says that the committee will allocate money and pay for staff to do that. Not that we're actually paying, it would be a transfer of funds from the heritage to planning, but we are spending staff time on that.
So it says part of transparency that that's occurring already. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm
Anything
clear.
further, Councillor?
I'm clear.
Any other members? Thank you, Mr. Schultz, for your presentation and for your work. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the municipal funding request submitted by the Heritage Pelham Advisory Committee be received, and the request included in the committee's 2015 goals and budget submission be referred for inclusion to the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. Any further discussion to that? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you again. Next, we have Mr. Harlan Young, who's here, representing the Carriage Hill Condominium Corporation. And I believe the treasurer, or sorry, the clerk, I'm sorry, just turned on the display here, so we'll have to wait a second. Carrie, would you mind Madam Treasurer, would you mind helping Mr. Young, please? Oh, he has it up, okay.
Push one button, I think, to go to. What's
This you? Is this your presentation?
I don't want that without the words.
Okay, yeah, we're just gonna go to slideshow then. There you go.
Oh, boy. I like to use a mic. Is this working?
Yes, it is.
Good.
I don't know that you have to bend over. I think
Well,
it's probably
okay.
fine.
Okay. First of all, I want to introduce, there are members from Carriage Hill Condominium here. There are owners. If you'd like to sort of put your hands up, since you've been good enough to come and give us some support here.
Thank you for joining us.
The presentation that we have today is regarding Carriage Hill. We're at 1599 Pelham Street. My name is Harlan Young, as I've been introduced, and I am the current president of the board of directors of Carriage Hill Condominiums. On behalf of the owners, we want to thank council for the opportunity to address this committee of the whole open house on a most pressing matter. We also want to thank the Director of Public Works and Utilities for his patience and assistance over the past 6 months. The purpose of this presentation is to demonstrate that it is imperative that the installation of storm sewers along Hurricane Road and Pelham Street be included in the Town of Pelham's 2015 budget. Carriage Hill was constructed in 1975. It's an 18-unit townhouse complex arranged in blocks of 7, 4, and 7 units, respectively. This is an aerial photograph provided by Niagara Region in 2010. It will be used throughout to orientate you to the situation at Carriage Hill. Along the left hand or west side running north from the bottom to the top is Pelham Street. Along the bottom, running from the intersection with Pelham Street to the right is Hurricane Road. And along the bottom right-hand corner running north to intersect with Hurricane Road is Chestnut Street. The 3 blocks of townhouses are clearly visible. The blue, obviously, is water. You'll be seeing basically where water is coming from, where it is going, and the potential it has on Carriage Hill site. Line A, during a heavy rainfall, water runs down Pelham Street to the intersection of Pelham and Hurricane, where a significant volume runs down Hurricane and ponds. At the same time, line B, at the same intersection, water crosses Hurricane Road and flows onto the property at the left-hand corner. If not that, line C, water also proceeds down Pelham Street and flows in the lower entrance. And then, of course, it goes on down Pelham Street. from the backyards, line D, the yellow D there, the backyards between Pelham Street and Chestnut. These backyards drain to a 12-inch culvert under Hurricane Road, which opens onto Carriage Hill. Line E, water runs down the left side of Chestnut Street to Hurricane, where it turns left and adds to the ponding on Hurricane. Line F, it also floods onto the property at the right-hand corner. All the water that enters Carriage Hill is directed to a single 12-inch storm sewer at the bottom right-hand corner of the property, indicated by the yellow circle. The next one, again, all the A, D, E, and F, these are the yellow lines, and you're basically going to see this in the next picture. This is the extensive ponding on Hurricane Road. Note, the water in the background is coming down Chestnut Street and Hurricane, flooding onto the property under the mailboxes, and proceeding on down to pond on Hurricane Road. The yellow guide wire that you see there is in the general location of the 12-inch culvert which runs under Hurricane Road.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
just which way is that facing again? If you
This
can
is
help us?
facing east towards Highway 20 or towards the Lions Park at the far end.
Thank you.
We're
That might be-
standing almost on Pelham Street looking that way, and the units are on the left.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is the other line of water that came from the intersection of Pelham and Hurricane onto the property, and the next picture will show you the river. This is the river, the flooding from Pelham Street. You can see in the background the stop sign. That's the stop sign at Hurricane and Pelham Street.
Facing west.
Rather dramatic, but that big blue circle I would describe as ponding. That ponding is the water that you saw on Hurricane. It's also the water that you saw on the back of the property. And I might mention, this water will eventually all drain out through that 12-inch catch basin. This is the flooding as it comes in off of Hurricane Road. This is another direction. It's coming. You can see the yellow guide wire in the back, which was on Hurricane Road. That's the water coming straight on to Carriage Hill property. You might see a swirl in the middle of that picture. That's the water trying to go into the catch basin. Like in your kitchen sink, it's trying to get in, but doesn't have the capacity. This will give you an idea. This is what it looks like as it starts to recede. So basically you can see that there was a lot of water there, and it's still draining into that catch basin. This is our storm sewer. When the building was constructed, that one yellow circle was the catch basin. The straight yellow line is the culvert that goes under Hurricane Road, draining the backyards onto the property into that catch basin. It was designed to drain the entire site to an open field just north of the property. However, the storm sewer was subsequently extended when a neighboring property was being developed. That's the red line. Cleaning that portion of the line in red is very problematic. So that's where all the water is designed to go. That is where the water will go once it... This is the situation that we also have. These are the 3 blocks of units, Block A, B, and C. All three of these were designed to have a floor drain and weeping bed all the way around each unit. These units then were designed to eventually feed into our storm sewer, which would then drain out the back of the property. Block A, because of its elevation, we had to put in a sump pump to pump it up to our storm sewer. Block B and C were designed to go directly into the storm sewer in the neighborhood of the yellow dot. What we were forced to do to avoid the possibility of water backing up into the weeping bed, backing up into the floor drains in Block B, and I would suggest potentially Block C, we were forced to disconnect the line to the storm sewer and add a red line to the other yellow dot, which is our sump pump. So now we're in a position to pump all of our water from our weeping bed, from our floor drains, into our storm sewer, and because that will usually happen long after a storm has gone by, the storm sewer will be able to take the water then. The storm sewer cannot take the water. It has the potential, you can see by the blue line along the edge of Block B, to run backwards and potentially flood units. We believe that the pictures and the text have clearly demonstrated the unacceptable volume of town water draining directly onto our site. It is entirely unacceptable to think that our single 12-inch storm drain should handle such volume. We, the owners of Carriage Hill Condominium, believe that the immediate construction of a storm sewer along Hurricane Road and Pelham Street should significantly reduce the volume of town water coming on to Carriage Hill. We therefore request that Pelham Town Council include the installation of a storm sewers on Hurricane Road and Pelham Street in their 2015 budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Young, for your presentation, and let's see what questions members of council may have for Mr. Young. Councilor Durley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Young, how long has this situation been a challenge to you folks?
This situation came on board about the same time that council had a challenge from other members of the community down off of Hurricane Road in the spring of this year. And we've been working with an engineer, and we've been working with the town to try to discover possible solutions for it. But it's largely been this year and last year that there was a problem with water. This is this year's pictures.
This is the major rain event that we did have that
Yes.
hurt a lot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our first flooding was
2005? September?
December.
2005, I stand corrected. So it is a longer standing problem than that. And the lady that just pointed it out, she happens to be the one who literally goes out and tries to keep our drain open so that the water can flow, which isn't a very good thing to be doing in the middle of the night, but that's how long they've been dealing, almost 10 years they've been dealing with that issue. So it's, one can see the amount of water there and what potential problem that causes for the town. But the way it's designed right now, the only place that water can drain, the only place, is onto our property.
Okay.
So
Thank
you can see by the volume, not only there, there. You can see it flowing. So, and then even if that is addressed, we do know that it's going to go on down Pelham Street and over the burn and into our property, just as it goes down to the neighbor and goes straight into their garage.
Thank you.
Not this year, the year prior, when it went down into Unit B, where I live, and flooded our basement, and then it flooded again this year.
So,
Young?
we were just, she was suggesting that when you get to the, where are they, this way? There, this one. They're in Block B, and the reality was that it was last year, the first time that it backed up because of the pipe was full and the pressure of it, and it couldn't get out fast enough. It came back through into the weeping bed and into Block B. They subsequently have put in backflow valves, and those have worked largely, but we have solved the problem because now there is no back pressure of that water because it's going into a sump pump.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from members? Councillor Junkin, then Councillor Kersey. Councillor Junkin.
So to be sure then, if I could, I'll just get here. To be sure, the water coming from, is it Chestnut Street?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, if we eliminated this water going this way, then this, is that a 12-inch culvert you're saying?
Yes.
That would handle that then?
I'm not suggesting it would handle it. I think it would reduce it.
Okay. So your main concern, you want us then to do, obviously, to stop that flow and that flow, basically? Yeah.
Do what you can to reduce it, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be
Yep.
clear on that.
Thank you. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Mr. Young, I find it curious that our culvert, or the culvert from the backyards that front on Pelham Street and Chestnut, in fact, goes under the Hurricane Road and empties onto your property. Is that part of a development agreement that allowed the development of that property, that you would accept that water?
Well, I would suggest to you that in 1974 or 76, whatever sort of conditions existed at that particular time, I have no reference to. So what agreement was made when the project was approved by the town, I would have no knowledge. I almost would guess, and I could stand corrected, that culvert was added later to address the fact that there was flooding further on the bottom of the pitcher, and in order to alleviate that, but I'm not sure of that. And I think that road has been rebuilt. I think there's even been a burn attempted on Hurricane maybe to do that, but I have no knowledge. I would assume they would know that there would be water coming, the yellow line you're talking about, from directly behind. That would be, if anything, part of a natural, but all the other water that's coming off of the main roads, that's water that over distance has been channeled. It's just not surface water that's, so I don't know if Mr. Mantle might be able to assist with that, or do you have an answer for that, for the councillor's question, Mr. Mantle?
Yes, when the Carriage Hill was developed, the intent was that that was the natural lay of the land. The confluence of all those streets, though, for the flow of the water, all ended up at that intersection of Hurricane and Pelham Street, and ran diagonally across the property, and led to the farm fields to the northeast. Over time, there's been, the site was developed, and I believe the intent was that they would accommodate those flows as part of that development. Over time, there's been infilling of lots farther up the hill. Hard surfaces have been constructed. The water doesn't percolate back into the soil like it did at one time, so you've increased these flows. And then with the storms that we had last spring and in the summer, the 3 storms, they've all drawn more of a urgency to the need to do some repairs there. We've also, as part of the master plan for stormwater management in the area, we've done theoretical designs. First storm sewers indicates where storm sewers shall go as they're funded by the town. We coordinate them with road reconstructions and water main replacements, and there is one identified for Pelham Street, which will outlet to Short Hill Place. So that has all been identified as future works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mantle. That answers your question and more. Councillor, do you have other questions?
Yes, I just had a follow-up, Mr. Mayor. The red line on your one drawing, which shows the extension of your 12-inch
Yes.
behind the development that took place sort of north of your development, is that a privately owned?
Yes.
And it at this point not being maintained to the standards that?
I have no knowledge of how it's maintained, or how I believe it does open up onto the property next door above ground. We're very reluctant. We clean our pipe out coming from the red line down, but when it gets to the red line, for some reason, it drops vertically, and we have difficulty, and we're not sure what we should be doing about cleaning the line out on someone else's private property.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, perhaps we could follow up that question to Mr. Mantle as well, to comment whether there was to have been a swale back there as opposed to an actual pipe, or is it an open drain? What are we dealing with there?
Mr. Mantle, can you assist?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there was a swimming pool constructed next door to the north, and that the pool's been built over top of the open water course that was previously existed. So I believe it's piped beneath the pool at this time. And again, Mr. Young's correct. It's a privately owned pipe, as is the pipe on at the condominium site.
Councillor?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Mantle, so the town would have no jurisdiction over dealing with that outlet and that storm sewer? I mean, would we not have been, in granting a building permit, would we not have been cognizant of that and ensured that adequate flows and maintenance would have been in place?
Mr. Mantle?
Yes. Well, I'm in Public Works, so that's the building department that would deal with that. But my assumption would be that they would look at something like that as part of the permit, or if there is such a thing for the construction of the pool.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Others? Councillor Powell.
Just following up on that, through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mantle, so one of the remedies, or possibly the only remedy, is to construct, you've identified this area for stormwater construction? Is that what you're suggesting to us?
Mr. Mantle?
Yes. Well, again, it's been identified in our master plan for the storm sewer system, and being at the bottom of the system, that's where you would start. Again, the pipes come up to Short Hill Place already, and there's stormwater management on Short Hill Place, so it would certainly be dealt with at that point, and it would be part of a complete road reconstruction of Pelham Street as the way we forecast it.
A complete road reconstruction of
That's correct, yes.
Pelham as well.
Pelham Street from
all the way down
Short Hill Place to Hurricane Road,
down to Hurricane.
and you could more or less resolve that issue.
Resolve this issue.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Others? Mr. Mantle, just quickly, you mentioned a general design.
It's a theoretical design. It just simply shows lines on a plan right now, and the drainage areas where the water is theoretically supposed to go to for each section of pipe. So it's similar to what we've done on Highland Avenue with the reconstruction up there. Those storm sewers were all drawn on the plan, and we simply use those for our approval process with the Ministry of the Environment.
But in terms of, you're suggesting it's in future works, but let's say council were to direct that this be done and moved quickly, what are the steps that await us? What are the next steps?
Next steps would be a request for proposal from engineers to do the design.
For the design.
And tender the project on behalf of the town. We don't have that expertise to do that. They do have a base plan, complete their design, tender the project, and proceed.
Thank you. Welcome. Anything further from councillors? Thank you very much, Mr. Young, and to members who are here.
Excuse me, I'd just like to restate again, and I can appreciate it, is that the process that you need to go through to actually do the construction. But our appeal really is that the process start in 2015, not 2018 or 2020. We realize it will take 2 or 3 years for the process to work its way through. That's why we're here tonight, to see that hopefully it becomes part of the 2015 budget.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
presentation and for that clarity. It has been moved by Councillor Kersey, seconded by Councillor Junkin, that the municipal funding request submitted by Carriage Hill Condominium Corporation be received, and that their request that the town of Pelham include the installation of storm sewers at Hurricane Road and Pelham Street be referred for inclusion in the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. Just to that, and maybe Councillor Papp is on the same mind.
Go ahead, maybe you're thinking along, no, you
Go ahead. I was just going to ask Mr. Mantle in terms of the timing, so is it, I guess we're not in that yet, but is it being recommended for 15 at this point, just for council's information? And what's the timeline that it would take? Would it take 1 year, 2 years? What I kind of heard was 2 years. Mr. Mantle, can you?
I forget which year it's identified. It's definitely not 2015, but the design process is not particularly complicated. Like if it was approved as part of the capital budget works, staff could move ahead with the request for proposals at the beginning of the new year, as soon as or immediately, really, and with award to a consultant, or simply awarded to the consultant that's already done the design on behalf of the town. He's partly there already, and proceed with the tender documents for the construction tender, hopefully early summer. So it'd be summertime construction.
So it is possible in 15 is what you're,
so, yes.
and best case scenario. Okay. Thank you very much for that clarity. Is that what you were going to ask, Councillor Papp?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because then we have the option of re-examining the capital budget timetable as well and looking at, but that's, you're on the
Councillor
same.
Papp, if you want to elaborate for members of the public.
We've set out a capital budget timeframe for where things are to be done, as simple as I can say. So, Mr. Young, through you, Mr. Mayor, that it has been slotted a little later in the schedule, but if we can get this process going earlier, and we can come to a conclusion with design drawings that are acceptable, and then we can reconsider the construction timeline as well. It's not unusual to do that. It's just a matter of that we'd have to go through all of the items, and I see that Madam Treasurer and CEO, we'll have to rejig and certain projects, but your argument and the presentation has been very impactful.
Very compelling.
Very compelling argument. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. Others? There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again for the presentation, and having walked the site, I should say this, having walked the site, and I appreciate the tour that you and others gave me, your presentation is very, very clear as well on what was occurring at the site, so thank you very much. Next we have Mr. Devine from the Niagara Central Airport. Mr. Devine, as you get started there, it looks like some will be leaving. Thank you very much for joining us this evening and for your input. We'll be continuing to work with Mr. Young on communications on this matter, so thank you.
It's up to council.
Good evening, everybody, and Merry Christmas as well. I hope that even though it's fairly early in the season, everybody is getting prepared for a very good Christmas season. My name is David Devine, and I am the manager of your airport, Niagara Central Airport. Though it is colloquially known as the Welland Airport, make no mistake, it is fully within the Pelham boundary. I point this out as over the years, there have been a surprising number of people who were either unaware of the airport's existence or of its location within Pelham.
Uh-oh. We're experiencing technical difficulties.
The airport is one of two within the Niagara region, the other being its sister, Niagara Regional Airport in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Niagara Central is owned by the municipalities of Pelham, Welland, Port Colborne, and Wainfleet. It is therefore a municipal asset, currently generating an economic impact of $4.5 million. I don't like to read what you can read yourself, but I'll give you a moment to have a look at that. Again, basically, as of 2014, approximately $4.5 million per year, far outweighing the annual $85,000 of municipal financial support. Early this year, it was determined an economic impact study would be helpful in determining how the airport contributes to the local economy and the region at large. Archibald Leclerc was subsequently hired to complete this study. As an aging infrastructure and a facility that started its life in service to Canada during the Second World War, it goes without saying that its upkeep, though occasionally costly, is far more than outweighed by the contribution it makes to the economy. And again, there you can see the current annual impact, where those figures come from. Last spring, the Airport Commission held a symposium in which a number of parties from the involved municipalities, local, regional, provincial, federal government, dignitaries were invited to see and discuss the past of the airport, its present, and the future direction of the airport. At this time, indirect visitor spending was shown to be even better than anticipated. And you can see up there indirect visitor spending. The Skydive Center alone attracts approximately 10,000 annual visitors per year. The average group size, 3.5 people. Estimated one-day stay, 70% versus 30% overnight, and so on. Skydiving projected at 50% traffic increase by 2018. Through discussions with the region, I have determined that, nonetheless, partnerships are usually required in grant programs, with the one-third, one-third, one-third model being fairly ubiquitous. Realizing future annual impacts you see here require current support, otherwise an opportunity will be lost. The economic future does look bright. There's, as I already stipulated, there's a significant increase in skydiving. More is projected. Skydive Niagara will add a sightseeing flight to their operations. St. Catharines expects flight training to grow to the same level as they have down at NDA, Niagara District Airport. Tarsi Aviation expects the doubling of their airplane maintenance work. And Accipiter Radar Technologies has signed an agreement to come and build a facility on site.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Part of the result of that symposium that we had last year was the completion of a master plan and an economic impact study, which brings me to the purpose of this presentation tonight. Your airport has a bright future and should be considered in transportation, recreation, educational, and quality of life needs. In addition to keeping the airport in the forefront of discussion, there are a number of expenses that need to be dealt with. The septic system in particular, and the roof repair being the most immediate needs, with costs that will likely come in at around $250,000. These are immediate needs, and the septic system itself is currently under the order from the MOE. In developing its budget, the Commission recognizes the needs for funds over and above those considered normal and customary. While there may be various support and grant programs available, such as the new Build Canada Fund, the operative word is may. As I also said previously, through discussions with the region, when we talked about the possibility of grants, even they were saying that the most they would be willing to look at would be a 1/3 input, expecting 1/3 from the municipality and potentially 1/3 from the provincial governments. In a conversation with Ottawa, Ottawa said that they also tend to follow the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule, but given that Ontario is now considered to be a have-not province, they will at times go with a 50-50 split. When your airport commission representatives come forward with an ask, consider not just the infrastructure itself, but the jobs at stake locally and beyond. I'm requesting that you support your airport in an appropriate manner so that this asset is not lost through negligence. Just as a growing airport will have a positive cumulative effect upon the local economy, the neglect of its facilities will have an inverse effect. There are no guarantees in life, but there are wise investments for the future. Just as funding may be provided by a grant, there's also the possibility of taking out a debenture. Should the commission, should the townships decide to go with a debenture, the Pelham portion would be approximately of the $250,000 for septic and roof alone would be about 18% or $45,000. In conclusion, Niagara Central Airport has already made a good contribution to the local economy and shows all signs of continued success and warrants the budgetary support of Pelham as a viable and important part of the municipal infrastructure. And for that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Devine, for your presentation. Questions from members of council? Councillor Ribbiak, our representative on the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to disclose that I am the representative on the commission. To Mr. Devine, just for clarity then, what we're looking at tonight in terms of an ask is what?
We are looking for $250,000 to cover the cost of the septic system and the roof, in addition to normal operating costs.
And I don't know whether you covered this in the presentation, I don't recall it, but costs at the airport are shared by the four
municipalities.
The four municipalities. Our share of that would
roughly
be what?
18%.
About 18% of the 250,000, so what's that, about less than 60,000?
Yeah, so I think I said 45.
45,000, sorry. Okay. Now, you talked about a debenture. Yes. And how do you see that working?
I personally am not a finance guru.
Okay.
A debenture would clearly have to go through the 4 townships, which is also a significant problem in dealing with any kind of a asset like an airport, where you have 4 municipalities involved, especially when they don't have equal ownership. And there's always a little bit of tugging and pulling as to who should do what and why they should do what and why would a town that's further away than the town where the airport actually exists become involved? So it entails a significant amount of agreement and conversation between all members of the 4 municipalities.
But theoretically, you see that the payment of the capital requirement would be on the basis of a loan over time, paid for over time, through the resources of the airport.
Yes, and given that rates are fairly historically low right now,
it's a good time to do it.
It's a better time than it may have been 5 or 10 years ago.
Thank you.
Okay.
Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Others? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Devine, could you just explain what induced impact is?
Okay, I'd like you to be a little bit more specific on the...
In your presentation, you talk about the economic impact, and within there's a statement that the induced impact, for example, I'm looking at the cumulative impact slide, and it talks about an induced impact of $13.6 million plus a realized impact of 6.8, which gives a total impact of 20.4 million. So I'm not overly familiar with the terminology induced impact, and I just was wondering what that was and how you attain that number.
I can give you my interpretation of it. This is a report developed by Archibald Leclerc Associates, who are expert in their field. I am not expert in my field, but essentially, if I back up perhaps a few more slides. The study methodology is here, where Mr. Leclerc would look at the current output of the airport, what is the actual payroll involved, which organizations are putting money into various aspects of the airport, what their private infrastructure is, what the municipal portion of the airport, how much money is going into that, and then extrapolating that per year. If one of the things that Mr. Archibald said was he used a conservative 2 times multiplier, whereas industry standard tends to be 3 or 4. 2 times is still good and acceptable. Each person he spoke to, so Tarsi Aviation, St. Catharines Flying Club, Skydive School, the airport itself, as the money increased over a period of time, it can be induced that will increase, and that by putting in an additional percentage of money, by making an additional investment through induction, that will then also increase.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can just help for a moment. My understanding from Archibald Leclerc is that he used a model generally used and accepted in developing economic impacts, and it's really the amount contributed in the general economy, not directly at the airport, but as a result of the investment in the airport. So the number of visitors who would come, for example, who would then go out and spend money elsewhere. And I guess what he's calling that is the induced impact. We're not the economists who developed it, but that's the
indirect impact, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Go ahead.
I just wondered, is that report open to the public, and could we attain a copy of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you arrange to have that sent over to?
Yeah, we'll arrange. Thank you.
In fact, the only thing left, it was official last week, and all that is left at this point is just to print it on nice stock paper.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councillor Papp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Devine. So just so I'm clear, and for my colleagues as well, the request is for a capital consideration of $250,000 to be shared amongst the 4 municipalities to deal with, and I'm not trying to put word, but there's 2 items. One is I hear that the roof is in major repair.
Yes.
And the one that is bothering me a lot is, of course, the septic system
yes.
has to be repaired.
Septic comes first.
My understanding is you can't play around with that.
Yes.
Okay. Then on top of that, the operating allocation, which we give every year, there's no adjustments there. Is that the way you understand it? I mean, each municipality
Not
contributes to
suggesting an
your...
increase or a change.
You're not asking for an increase to your operating budget from the amount you get from us?
I believe there was something in the order of a 1 to 3% increase. I've not seen the final copy of that yet.
Okay, so the commission hasn't approved that yet?
Okay.
Okay.
So the challenge still is the priority basis, you know where I'm going with this, Mr. Mayor, that capital item is something that, and I appreciate all the impact, but you have to repair the asset. You have to fix it and take care of it from a public health safety point of view. So then I think what you mentioned was correct, and I look towards the CEO and the treasurer. I know you'd have to negotiate or work something out. And I know it's been done in the past with other municipalities to share capital costs of a particular asset. So I don't know how you would do that. But what I'm hearing is an urgency, particularly with result of the fact that this work has to be done. Is that correct, Councilor Ribbeck?
Absolutely. You're right. May I just comment on what you said? You say it has to be done. Well, actually, it doesn't have to be done if there's no importance to the airport. But what Mr. Devine has demonstrated is that there is, in fact, a real place in the regional economy for the airport, and therefore, you're absolutely right, it has to be done.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Just two quick questions I have. You're saying that those that are doing the maintenance work, Tarzi AME, expects
Aviation,
doubling of airplane maintenance work over what time period?
Over the next, the doubling is actually expected over the next year and continue beyond that.
You also outlined on slide 7 that there's a number of works that are expected in the next 5 years. Hangar construction, cadet facility, construction of research hangar by Excipitor, etc. I don't know how to ask this other than to say, if this were a private airport, and I know there's very few there aren't any community private airports, but if this was Pearson International Airport, and there were works that were required, my understanding of how they would do it is that they would say to the tenants, there's some works that have some capital undertakings that have to be required, whether it's whatever it is. And since we're all tenants in the airport, we have to pay a portion. So you've outlined some works that are ahead. There are some tenants at the airport. Of the $250,000 for improvements, how much of that is to be paid by those direct users, or have you already, there's another 250 that they're paying for or something? Can you just explain how that
a good
functions?
example right now, so the tenants who are already there, that's already done with. The new tenants coming on board, and there are potentially right now 4 new tenants coming this year. In the initial talks with them, so we have Excipitor, possibly another business, and 2 private hangars. If they were all to give themselves the green light and go ahead, and if the commission in turn was to say, yes, your package looks good, you have the green light, go ahead. It is based on their decision to select Niagara Central is pretty much based on what they can achieve at that airport. So, as an example, the ground is leased on a per square foot basis. It is unserviced.
I guess, Mike, let me cut to the question. My question is, how much of the rents and all that is covering the capital improvements that are required at the airport? Or is this, are you only approaching the 4 owners for the capital dollars?
The funds that are currently coming in, what would come from tenants would not be sufficient to cover any of these capital.
So the answer is no. Okay.
So they don't pay any.
So they don't pay.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? No. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Devine, for your presentation. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the municipal funding request submitted by the Niagara Central Airport be received, and that the submission referred for inclusion to the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. I think one of the things we do have to clarify is the budget and the operating, and perhaps over coming weeks, Councillor well, I guess Councilor Ribbiak, if you could work on that, or staff can talk to Mr. Devine, or however that gets done. Any other questions, comments? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter, according to the agenda that we added, is Gary Chambers from Maple Acre Library. However, I do note, Jody McKay, pardon? Your daughter wanted to make a presentation, and it's getting late, and it's a school night. So I wondered if maybe you wanted to make that presentation first, if council would be okay with that?
No problem.
Are you ready to go? And Mr. Chambers, are you okay to hold off for a young person to make a presentation now? Thank you. And I forgot, you introduced yourself and I forgot your name. I'm sorry.
First of all, I'd like to say hello, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Byron Sinkler. I'm president of Pelham Minor Hockey. Last year,
who's our?
Oh, I'm not. Well, I just I was going to introduce her.
Okay, perfect.
Last year, about this time, I made a presentation in regards to the ladies' facilities down at the arena. This year, I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to have a young lady who deals with that issue as we go through the year. Her name is Samantha Barnes. She's presently a Pee Wee hockey player, and I think she has something to say to the group.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Thank you, Byron.
Actually, I wrote a letter earlier. I was going to send it to you. Is it okay if I read it?
Thank you. Please do.
Dear Mayor Augustin and Town Council, I have played hockey in the town of Pelham for 7 years. I love the sport, playing in my hometown and with all my friends. I'm also excited that more girls are joining PMHA. However, the town has not provided proper facilities for female players. The girls' change room at the Pelham Arena does not provide enough room for all of us. Only 3 girls can change in there at once. The rest of us have changed in the hallway in view of the fathers of male players. This is an uncomfortable situation. There are currently 10 Pelham girls playing in Pee Wee. If we are playing back-to-back or playing each other, there are a minimum of 6 girls in the change room. This does not include other female players from visiting teams. The town of Pelham needs to find an immediate solution to this problem. When we play in other centers, they provide proper change rooms for players. The girls' change room includes enough space for all female players and parents to tie skates behind closed doors. They also have access to washrooms. We have never changed in the hallway in other towns. Baron Sinclair has told my parents and me that he has met with town staff to discuss the problem, and they came up with solid recommendations for fixing this problem in 2014. He told us the group recommended an additional change room and washroom access for girls. This would be better than just one small room. We know you are working to build a new facility. However, this problem is not new and needs to be fixed immediately. You quickly found a solution for the new junior B team, yet you have failed to find a solution for the long-term players. Mr. Mayor, we are asking you to make a decision now to improve female change rooms at the existing Pelham Arena so that more girls have equal access to hockey in Pelham. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Barnes. Questions from members of council? And I think the clerk is interested in getting a copy of that, if that's possible. We can include that in our minutes. Here's our clerk. Thank you very much. And thanks for your patience. Questions? Councillor Papp?
Just quickly, thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor, or Byron, if you can, aside from those that have new hockey facilities, you do play at other centers around Niagara, correct?
Yep.
Okay, which are the ones where you actually have separate change rooms? Can you give us an idea?
Dunville has some.
Okay, that's new. They're a new facility, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're all new facilities.
Go ahead. Are there others?
Ones that still have some.
Okay.
That's like which ones maybe?
Yeah, like.
Niagara on the Lake has. Well, they have 5 change rooms, and we use the 5th change room.
Okay.
And there's a few more.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good enough.
Okay.
That's all you need.
Go ahead.
Smithville?
Which is an older arena, does provide
Right.
change rooms for the girls that are adequate. None of the other centers do they have to change in the hallway.
I'm familiar with.
Whether they're older or
Yeah. What I was trying to get is, I know the newer ones, sorry, Mr. Mayor, and I won't belabor it, but Smithville, I'm familiar with that arena. They do provide, because it is the older facility, they do provide change rooms for female hockey players. Okay, good.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Kirsty?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the one thing I don't understand, if the girls are playing hockey, now, this is not a mixed league. This is specifically a women's league.
No.
Mixed league.
Oh, so that's why you can't be using
It's
the
mixed.
existing change rooms. You're playing on boys' teams. I see, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
The boys are playing on the girls' teams, Counselor.
Yeah, the boys are playing on the girls' team.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Others? No. Can I have a motion to receive the presentation and
So
direct
moved.
it to the,
So moved.
for more information
Second.
to staff? Moved by Counselor Durley, second by Counselor Papp. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we're directing staff to take a look at it and come up with some solutions. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and thanks, Byron, for speaking as well. Thank you. Thank you for your patience this evening as well. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chambers, for your patience and allowing the young lady to go ahead first. You're next on the agenda.
I am Gary Chambers, as the mayor introduced, and a member of Maple Acre Revitalization Committee. Now, on behalf of the residents, Mr. Mayor and council and staff, the residents of Fenwick and beyond, the Friends of Maple Acre, the Pelham Library Board, the Pelham Heritage Committee, we'd like to thank you for accepting the committee's report, as well as your support and direction through the open house workshops and subcommittee meetings of the last year. We would now ask council for that same support by including in an architectural design in the 2015 budget. A revitalization concept and in line with Fenwick's future growth will take Maple Acre into its next 100 years as a unique branch of the Pelham Library System. Now, it would be understood by all involved that any changes to Maple Acre branch will not affect the operating budget of the library until the new facility is constructed. Once again, we thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chambers, for your presentation. And I note that there's a number of friends of Maple Acre Library here and others involved in the library, so thank you very much for joining us. Questions for Mr. Chambers from members of council? No? Okay, thank you. A motion
Thank you
to,
again.
thank you very much. Motion receive, Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Papp. And I believe there is, oh, there is a motion, I'm sorry. Thank you. So, well, that motion is moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley. A municipal funding request submitted by Maple Acre Revitalization Committee be received, and the request to include costs associated with an architectural design for Maple Acre Library branch project be referred for inclusion to the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. Comments or questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you again for the presentation and your work on that. Thank you. We also added Jerry Winicki, who I don't believe is here, regarding diesel hockey. Is there a representative from that group here?
He submitted a letter late this afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Winicki family did submit a letter late this afternoon. Do you wish me to read the letter into the record?
If you could read part of it, the highlight.
Sure, I'll read it out. They are planning a 2-day tournament, the second annual Diesel Classic Tyke Friendship Hockey Tournament, and they are asking for donation of the ice time required for the fundraiser again this year, as was done in 2014, and that would be for ice time for March 28th and 29th.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Junkin, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that the municipal funding request submitted by the second annual Diesel Classic Tyke Friendship Hockey Tournament be received, and the request to waive arena rental fees for the tournament be referred for inclusion in the 2015 budget for council's consideration at a future date. Any further discussion? There being none, we call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. As was promised at the beginning, now is the opportunity, should there be members of the public here that would like to give additional public input, and we certainly appreciate those that have provided input thus far in the evening. Are there any members of the public who'd like to provide additional input at the podium? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any other items of correspondence to which council needs to be aware? I know that there were ways in which members of the public could make presentation through the Our Budget email and letter to you directly. Are you aware of any additional pieces of correspondence?
Through Mr. Mayor, I did check Our Budget late this afternoon, and I did not see anything new. The treasurer may have some
Madam
additional
Treasurer?
information.
No, there's nothing new.
Okay. Thank you. We don't need that motion. Thank you very much, members of the public, for your presentations. Council, do you want to take a brief break, 5-minute break, before we move on to the next item of the agenda, and that will allow us time to clear the gallery. You're all welcome to stay, but council will now move on to consideration of some risks for the budget. So we'll now take a brief recess. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Stretch. Stretch break.
Yes.
Maybe.
I see that we have quorum, and we will reconvene our meeting.
Way to go, Marvin. You're
I
standing
think
up
we
there.
need a projector on, or whatever it is.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. The next portion of the meeting is a budget overview. You have provided a document to council, so thank you. And this document includes all of the requests from earlier in the evening?
Good ones in there.
It's just added it up. We better buy some lotto tickets.
Whole airport.
Would you like me to close the door? No? No, we can-
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight's budget meeting agenda is, we're going to discuss some of the impacts on the operating budget and capital budget items. And following these, this agenda, included in here would be the projected operated increase based on what we know to this date for increases. I have a growth forecast for council this evening as well. Budget open house requests, I'm just going to briefly talk about how they may impact on the budget. I'm looking for some budget guidance going forward. I would like to share with council also the forecast to year end that I'm projecting for 2014, and also what a reserve forecast looks like for this year end as well. On the capital budget side, as council is aware, we did an evaluation criteria session with SMT, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The individual budget reviews and how they ranked with respect to that evaluation criteria. Department priorities that were identified as a result of all of that, plus the additional criteria which I'll go through with council, and then 2015 recommendations to date. Things are not finalized as of yet, obviously after the last meeting. So on the operating budget side, these are the items that I've brought forward with the CAO for council's consideration as potential impacts on the 2015 budget. One of the items is the CIP and the transfer to reserve. In previous years, we always took surplus funds and moved them to the reserves because we haven't had excessive surplus funds in the last couple of years. I find it prudent to put some money aside. We do have applications already in process, and they're going to start eating away at a lot of the reserve balances that we have. So it would be prudent to put some money towards that going forward as well. Council was brought forward healthcare spending account for staff. It's approximately a $30,000 item. However, because of the savings we had on the benefits in 2014, the impact on the operating budget is only $15,000. The sustainability increase, that is the transfer to reserve increases, and you will note later on in the capital budget, we are increasing some of the reserve balances within departments just for sustainability. They are the transfers that they're currently doing are not enough to take that
that reserve into a healthy balance over 5-year periods. So it's prudent that we increase those, and specifically in the planning department is one of them. The facilities reserve is another that, now that we have a facilities coordinator here, the needs for our buildings is becoming excessive for what the reserve can handle. The salary, that's the PP, meaning the performance planning piece, which includes the COLA adjustment and potential award above COLA, and the new complement that was approved by council previously. That is what is included in that number. We have our insurance program, which is coming to council on the 15th. There is a slight increase of $10,000 on that program, and that is specifically to do with the new facilities that we have, fire station number 2, number 3, and some of the other additions that have bettered the buildings and made them a little bit more costly to insure. So that brings us to a projected increase based on those that we do know of $433,000. We have a gross projection, which I will show you the calculations for in a bit. It's about 115. We don't have the final number yet, but this is will bring the net projected increase to 318,479. So based on that, if we look at our projected increase of 433, which I just showed you on the previous screen, the increase on the expenditure line is 3.59% overall. But taking into consideration that we are keeping revenues neutral, I'm not projecting any new revenues at this time, it actually increases the total to 4.32. After we take growth off, which is about 1.14%, you're looking at a 3.17% increase right now. This is given that we have not looked at all of the budget in totality to determine if there's any more efficiencies that we can find to help bring this number down. This is the growth projection. We did receive some information about the assessment. However, growth takes into consideration a lot of things. There's write-downs and write-offs that are happening throughout the year as well, so we need to make sure that we take all of that into consideration before we bring the final actual growth number to council. This is a conservative projection of what the growth is for 2014. It's significantly higher than last year's growth.
Last year's was 1.9?
1.06.
06.
It was projected at 0.63 for budget purposes at this meeting last year, so I'm hoping that we get a nice little surprise like that on the growth again this year. Different from last year, I brought forward the reserve balances to council just to show that one of the main focuses for this budget year was to make sure that our reserves were starting to be rebuilt and healthy so that we can use them for cash flow and to fund the projects that they're actually funding within departments. You will note, although we are increasing from 3.7 to 4.4 projected, and this doesn't take into consideration all the capital project expenditures at this point. They're not all in yet. We have some projects that are still ongoing, and capital expenditures have not been received. The invoicing has not been received. However, in the 4.4, you'll notice that water and wastewater budgets make up about half of that and help us to fund some of the other deficits and reserves at the throughout the year. If you take them out, then our discretionary reserves are at about $2 million. And different than other years, the budget open house and budget requests have been available to me to bring forward at this time. A little bit different this year. I will bring the requests forward to council at the next meeting of budget for capital and identify where the requests have been brought forward into the budget process, or with the affordability piece, getting some direction from council on what items to include in the budget process. And that will be brought forward at the council meeting, our capital meeting. So that leaves us with what our projected increase will be at this time, just based on those items that we either already know have been approved by council, legislated items, and salary increases. Just for council's information, the impacts that have been presented are for consideration. It's up to council on whether they go forward or not. Again, the projected increase is currently at 3.17. Again, that's a number that we can work with respect to the budgets and looking at any more efficiencies that we can find to help bring that down. The growth factor is still not actual until the end of the year. Projected increases do not include any potential increases in revenues, as I indicated. I don't look for that at this time because I'd like to be as conservative as possible. And they do not include any additional increases in expenditures due to service requirements. So As I indicated at the orientation to council, what we look for is part of our performance planning, having those efficiencies as part of staff's requirement for performance planning, and that those efficiencies will save money so that new initiatives can be done within the same budget number. And then we are looking for guidance, obviously, from council on the target increase for Pelham for 2015. Just in addition to that, I'd like to provide council where I think we may end up at the end of this year. As you are aware, this year was had quite a few emergency items with respect to additional snow clearing for the additional snow days that we had, and also with respect to the flooding that we had. We did identify that there could be a reserve transfer and some funds from a reserve, but if we can fund it from they were all operational type expenditures that were done in the operating budget. So right now, this is what's being projected to year end based on determining what the expenditures would be till year end and additional revenue. This will be updated for council in early February. And that's it for the operating side of the budget. So if there's any questions on that, I can stop now and we can move on to capital.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Treasurer, through you, Mr. Mayor, what was the increase in the sustainability recommendation in terms of total budget? Was it like 1.7% or 1%?
Of the total budget of?
Yeah, you're recommending a sustainability increase of
176,000.
Yes, 176. So it's within each department. The roads department and recreation have a 1.05% increase that's done on an annual basis. And the other items are just specifically where in facilities and in planning that we've identified that the actual reserve just needs to increase. It kind of stays fluent. Facilities is kind of going up a little bit each year, and that's being recommended for consideration of council. So this basically is just helping build the reserve balances that we have that are not fully able to sustain the expenditures that are happening from those reserves.
Okay. Yeah.
Were you looking for a percentage, Councillor?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what the percentage was of the total budget. It's about 1.7% of it.
Well, it's about 1.7. It's probably a little less than that. It's a $12 million expenditure budget. So.
Okay, so a little less. Okay, what is you're projecting 3.17% increase in the operating budget, which is really what impacts the levy. So, have you projected what that would be on the average? You know, the quote average home in terms of dollars and cents?
No, I haven't yet. I haven't got the final reports from MPAC on with respect to determining that average number and some of the final impacts with respect to the growth and so forth. So I have not projected what that increase would be at this time.
I see. Okay. That's all for now.
Okay. Others? Councillor Junkin?
On our orientation, I believe you said that the percent of wages and benefits was 42%. Since that time, I've gone online and I've gone through about 10 other municipalities, and that is very high for us. And actually, the other ones I found are around 34% of the operating budget is wages and salaries. I just wondered, are we ever going to get that down again to a reasonable amount?
Madam Treasurer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have not done the analysis between other municipalities with respect to that. I like finding out exactly percentages. I know that in discussions at the area treasurers, we were all around the same mark. There are different ways of the salaries being allocated out to water and wastewater budgets, which may make your operating budget look a little bit less with respect to the percentage there. There's different avenues and different ways of the salaries being allocated within your budget. So, and if we're looking at the FIR, it's a very difficult statement to look at provincially to find exact comparables between municipalities. But I know that in discussions with other municipalities at the area treasurers meetings, we were all basically in the same line. I don't know the municipality that you say is at 34%, but you know, I could do some research on that as well.
And for Councillor Junkin, FIR is?
The financial information return, I'm sorry.
That's filed with the province. Councillor?
And one other thing, I see that the difference between operating revenue or operating expenses and revenue, it bottoms out to be zero, really, right? Was that a correct, what I saw on that line there? It had operating expenses and and then revenue, and then the difference was, I believe, there were basically no reserves, is what I'm saying.
This is just the operating expenditure and revenues. So when we take this into consideration, I keep the revenues neutral so that I can be conservative in what this operating increase would be. So any additional revenues is only going to drop that 3.17 down.
Okay. And so our total reserves, meaning budgetary, what are our total reserves right now?
Right there, at the end of, we're projecting our balance to be 4.467 million.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Papa.
Just quickly, no, maybe you answered that. When you do the performance management system, maybe I was misunderstood. You're not including COLA. I thought we're going strictly to pay for performance. Or am I mistaken, Mr. CA?
Through you, Mr. Mayor?
Are we still going to explain,
Madam Treasurer, how'd you arrive at the number and what is it?
Performance management.
Right.
But it's by level too. So if there's a 1 to 5 scale, 3 is COLA. So I need to budget for what we potentially could pay out to the staff, and that's what that number represents.
So the COLA is the cost of living, and then on top of that is the performance management, based on...
COLA is also performance managed.
It's included in
Yes.
that. Okay, that's where I'm getting confused.
So I've determined a number to use in the budget file for salaries,
Right.
just to make sure that
Right.
those that didn't do well on the performance plan, but those are offset by those that did really well. So there's a balance there.
Okay.
Mr. CEO wants to add to that, Mr. CEO.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The performance management system is designed that that employees are evaluated on a scale between 1 and 5.
Right.
Obviously, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. If you're an employee and you score a 1 or a 2, there is 0 increase. Period.
That's what I'm getting at.
If you're an employee that scores 3, which would represent an employee who comes to work, does their job, and goes home and everything's fine, that would be representative of awarding a COLA increase, which keeps you in line with cost of living.
Right.
If you're an employee that scores 4 or 5, let's say a 5, you would be the highest performing top talent employee that would get COLA plus whatever percent on top of that as performance benefit.
Okay, that explains it. That's what I thought.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Kersey, is it on that? I have a question on that point.
No.
Okay. Just on that point, Madam Treasurer, and I guess it's maybe on the first slide. So the new complement and the salary performance, like what's that, just to go back to what Councillor Kersey asked earlier about a percentage, what does that jar look like, or that bucket that those dollars are going to be dumped into a bucket, and then, as the CEO outlined, they're going to be given for performance? What's that bucket look like as a
Dollar figure?
as a percentage?
As a percentage, it's probably, I'd say,
Or if you can get that number when you...
yeah, it's probably 40%
present.
of that number.
No, of the total budget, of the total HR budget.
Total staff.
Let's say we just
salary
said, you know what, there's no performance, everybody gets the same amount, regardless of whether you're a star or not a star.
It's slightly over 2%.
Okay. If we could, it'd be helpful to have that number, I think, moving forward. So, Councillor Kersey, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I wanted to ask through you to our treasurer, when one of your statements was that with this sustainability increase that you're recommending here, you were projecting that over a 5-year period, our ending balances in our reserves would be in a positive, would be all positive. Did I interpret that correctly?
In some departments.
I guess what I'm getting at is, did you look at all of the projects that have been projected out over our past budgets and look at those and what those costs would be, what would be the drawdown on the reserves, and then with the addition of this increased $175,000 going forward over the next 5 years, what would the picture be at the end of that 5-year period in terms of the reserves? Like, I'm very much in favor of building a strong reserve base, because that allows us to do things and makes us sustainable and resilient and all the good things that we talk about. So I'm just kind of trying to get a handle on that, of where we are and what we should be looking at.
We take into consideration we stand out 10 years. I've asked all of the department heads to give me a 10-year budget forecast so I could see what was coming on the horizon. And just based on that, just based on the facilities alone reserve, because the indexing has been done on the municipal buildings now, there's not enough money going into that reserve to sustain us until, for 10 years out. So we need to be prudent, start building that reserve up heavy. And we started from a $200,000 transfer into this reserve when we have $300,000 and $400,000 and $500,000 worth of projects each year to be done. So how do I make that work? We add to the reserve, and that's the sustainability piece. So some are getting more than others. The roads is got a great transfer from operating, has an automatic increase of 5%, but we also need to make sure that we have a balance in that reserve at year end, like we did for this year. We had to pull 3 projects back to fund emergencies. Well, we should have enough funding there for those emergencies without having to pull projects back. Because if the projects would have got done, then we're pulling from a working funds reserve that we don't have enough funds for. So that was my goal this time around in the budget, is to not only get it looking good in 5 years, but make sure that we have some money available in each year to not only help fund emergencies, but to help fund cash flow issues that we end up with at this time of year as well. So, and that was the focus for the whole group when we met as a senior management team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I through you, I think that's great planning. And so going forward, you would be recommending in each of the succeeding 4 years that we would be doing exactly the same sort of thing, would be to be bumping up our let's call it our sustainability contribution to our reserves going forward.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. I think with where we're heading as a municipality, with the new infrastructure we're looking to take on and additions that are within the budget already, some new vehicles coming, I think it's prudent that we make sure that there's a healthy balance there, that we can take on these projects, maintain them properly, and do the work that's needed to be done. So that's primary focus. I mean, I think I was given that direction a few years ago when we had the playground grant award, and that reserve ended up in a deficit as a result. And you'll see that it's in a positive light now, and it continues to build that over the next few years as well.
Well, I think that's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to that sustainability piece? So just for clarity, this is not a one-time piece. This is what your recommendation here would be, to embed it 176 into the budget this year and every year moving forward. I think that's what Councillor Kersey was getting at in terms of the longer term impact of that. Is that correct?
There is always an increase in the sustainability piece each year, because we have the automatic ones that go up 5%. There's 3 of them: vehicles, rec services, and roads. So that's an automatic impact on the levy, unless we can find savings somewhere else, which we have done. But outside of that, the planning reserve is going up by $20,000, and it's going to be maintained there for a while. So because there's not, at 10 years out, we don't have massive things on the horizon, so you don't want to build it up to a point where it's just excessive. So there is a little bit of an impact every year. It might not necessarily be the 176. Last year it was 129. So, this year it's 176 because of the other pieces. But
yeah, but my point is this. My point is, if it was 129 last year, on top of the 129, we're adding 176. And on top of the 176 this year, we're going to add. That was my question.
Yes, sorry, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think moving forward, there were some questions about that reserve and the all the reserves. So if that can be clarified in terms of what does that look like, and the inputs that you're budgeting or anticipating that you'd want to recommend to council in order to get those reserves in the healthy balance that you're suggesting. So when it comes forward, when the operating budget and the reserves and everything, it'd be helpful to know what those look like. Other municipalities are looking at a 1%, a 2% every year, step to deal with it. Mississauga, I think, is one of them, etc. So, municipalities across Ontario looking at that. I think we're just looking for clarity on what it is that this is, and I think that's why Councillor Kersey was looking for a number of percentage, etc. So if we can have that moving forward with the reserves when it comes to us.
Yeah, for sure. I think part of the problem for this one is that for instance, in the planning studies that we're doing, we're taking on an extensive amount of planning studies going forward. The next couple of years, he's identified, and you'll see them later
Yeah.
on coming up. And you'll see how that reserve, you know, the transfer from operating is right on the 5-year projection, and you're going to see how that reserve maintains a healthy balance. One of the issues we had with being tied into a certain percentage increase each year is it became too excessive at one point when you're dealing with a $1.4 million transfer from roads, for instance. You know, 1 year it was 6%, and then it ended up at 6%, and then it got so excessive that the impact was too great on the ratepayers. So we ended up pulling it back to 0.5%. So that's where we don't really want to get tied into the percentage increases necessarily, but this, you know, what we're looking for now is always projecting out 10 years and being able to identify what that reserve needs to look like.
Okay.
And with proper planning, you shouldn't need to do too much different to that with respect to costing, except account for inflation in the cost of
Yeah, no,
expenditures.
I recognize this is the first blush of it, so we'll get more information. I'm just asking, as it comes forward, we get more information on that.
Okay.
Others, any other questions? Councillor Pat?
Just quickly, I think it's critical what you stated about the 10-year plan, because as we take assumption and build new municipal assets and buildings, that those monies have to be set aside, and I'm thinking what many of us know is obvious, along with vehicles, roads and that, we build a new facility down the street, all that, and you're right, Mr. Mayor, we need to accumulate that. So whether there's a formula or that, I think it protects us instead of being put in the position of others where we have the people go out and they borrow the money to pay for these repairs. So it's great planning.
Okay. Thank
Thanks.
you. Anyone else? Two other quick questions on that slide, same slide. The CIP, again, this is not, is this a one-time? Or is this will be embedded into the budget, 50,000 every year for the next, until we don't do it anymore?
My recommendation to council is that this is embedded into the budget. So this will be the one-time hit, and then next year it would be consistent the same.
Okay.
And I think influxing of $50,000 a year will help sustain us for a bit.
And the same with the spending account, the healthcare
That's-
amount?
Yes, that's embedded, and it doesn't change after this year.
Okay, all right. Oh, and the library. Is there an amount for the library in this?
There is no increase for the library in here. I was not aware of what they were asking for up until presentation time. I did not want to inflate the 3.17 until we get it straightened out with respect to the budget.
So you have it zero for the library, is
I
that
have a
correct?
0% increase for the library right now.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Would you mind moving ahead to the
Sure.
capital?
On to the capital budget. As council is aware, SMT met, we went through the creative problem-solving process to identify 10 different areas that we thought were significant criteria to be used in evaluating each project. Those being health and safety legislation, impact on operating costs, whether they were innovative or not, how they benefited the whole of the Niagara region. Did they develop economic prosperity in the projects that were coming forward? Did we make sure that there was fairness and equity? How did they maintain our small town feel? How did they engage our residents, or was there public demand for the project, and does it enhance the quality of life? So based on that, senior management sat through 2 separate meetings, and we evaluated every project that was brought forward. Now, the projects that you're going to see on the next slides are the ones that were brought forward originally, and the projects you're going to see near the end of the slides are the ones that we're bringing forward for recommendation to council. So these, we ranked them, when we came in with the total scores, we ranked each project within the department, 1 through whatever, how many projects they had. And this is the ranking that we came up with for information technology, for instance. So I won't spend a lot of time on each slide, but the process was followed by all of SMT and presented to them this morning, I believe. So with respect to the public works facilities, you can see that the rankings went from 1 to 10 projects based on the criteria as well.
Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, Madam Treasurer, so 1, forgive my stupidity, so 1 being the top rank, 10th being the lowest
Yes,
rank,
that's
right?
correct, yes.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
I have a question with regard to that.
Councilor Rubio?
That's right, so the priority is just the order? The numbers are not significant in terms of their relationship with one another?
No.
That is, a 3 might be significantly less than a 6, it's just the order.
It's just the order, yeah.
Except there's 2 9s. Can you explain that?
Projects scored the exact same, and several did. When you come to the roads, you'll see that a lot of the roads scored exactly the same. They have the exact same scoring across in the weighting. So you'll see that that number is repeated multiple times. So for instance, the pool mechanical room upgrades and the efficient lighting scored the same on the evaluation criteria.
Okay.
So how do you determine the order between them?
Well, we took into consideration other additional criteria as well. So this is just the criteria based on the scoring, okay, that was established by the staff. So if you have the same score, they weight the same. So then we took into consideration additional criteria, which I'll get to in a little bit on the slides for council.
Okay, thank you. Anything further?
Just for clarity, so some of that is relative to one another. They're
Exactly.
equally important. But for the most part, it's the order, not the weighting.
For the most
Not the
part,
relative
yes,
weighting.
like 1 being the most important based on the weighting system, that the criteria, and then 10 being the least important.
Important.
It is weighted.
It is weighted.
It's the order that the weights appeared in, as opposed to how far apart the,
Well, it's not absolute numbers, it's just,
yeah, it's the order.
Right.
So we
Number
don't
one
know, we
could
don't
be-
know how much more important the first one is than the 10th. They might only be marginally more important one than the other, but we've spread them out versus in another list where something might be absolutely vital and everything else is relative. But we don't have any sense of that spread. But that's all I'm saying.
It's a ranking, not a score.
It's a ranking, not a score. Except for there's a tie.
Right.
No, I'm confused.
Who wanted
It's not
to,
Right.
somebody down here wanted to ask something.
You cleared it, because that's what I was trying to figure out, was if this not weighted, it's just a ranking. So it's not like the very first thing you're gonna do on forgive me, for Public Works would be the number 1, picking up Councilor Verbiak's Pelham Street Special Events Power Supply. It's just a ranking. It's not a weighted, it's not the first thing you would do?
It's not necessarily.
You know where I'm going with it? This, my first project is I'm gonna do these in order of 1, 2, 3, 4. But that's
Yes,
not what I'm
exactly,
understanding.
and that's what you would get from what you see on the screen. However, we have to take into consideration other items with
Right.
respect to this. This is the scoring from the weighted averages that were given across those criteria back here. So if I just go back to
Criteria.
this, these criteria are, when you score them from 1 to
Right.
10, they weight.
Right.
So you get a weighted average on the end, and that's how these are ranked, based on that weighted average.
That's what I
So,
figured.
okay? So,
Just a-
remote backup for main servers might have got 75% out of the 100, and number 4 might have got 10% of the 100.
Gotcha.
There could be a good spread like that, but this is how these projects rank for IT, within that IT
Ranking,
department.
not a score.
Yes, it's just ranking, not a score.
That's right.
it's not absolute.
Question on this, how do you measure impact on operating costs? How do you measure that? If it's a big number, it's a bad score, and if it's a little number, it's a good score?
If it's got a significant impact on the operating costs, it would be a low score. Because when we did the evaluation.
But we could do a whole bunch of little projects and they'd be all get, 9% off the.
No,
off
not
the top.
necessarily. I mean, a lot of our little projects had either significant impact or little, and some of the big ones had significant impact or little. So what we took into consideration as SMT, we said, how is this going to impact on staff time? How is it going to impact on the resources we use, on operational costs going forward? If we do this project, it will have an impact on them. Those are things you need to consider when you're doing a budget like this. So those things were all considered on the impact of operating cost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kersey?
Just very quickly, so the projects were ranked or rated or scored at SMT by all members of SMT.
By all
It's not
members.
department-specific scoring, it's all members.
They scored. We all scored together as one unit
Okay,
for
good.
each department.
Good, okay.
And there had to be consensus.
Yep,
So
okay, good.
opinions were made and discussions were had and
Good,
so forth.
excellent,
Okay.
yep.
So I'll just quickly go through these slides as you can see the rankings. So here's an example where a lot of the road work that's being done is evaluated across 1 to 10, exactly identical. So they fell within the same ranking on this chart. as a result of that.
Which one is number one? Oh, there it is.
Is there a reason you didn't put it in order of ranking?
Well, it's just because the projects on the side are in project order on the left-hand side, and it would screw up our spreadsheet.
Number 11, it would screw up our spreadsheet. Okay.
We can't screw up the spreadsheet. So it's easy to bring this back into.
Oh, good.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, so on to the additional criteria evaluation.
Any questions for what the treasurer went through very quickly?
I think we need, Mr. Mayor, I think at some point we got to come back together, go through this,
Yeah,
right?
we're going to go through the projects that are being recommended, and then council can start asking questions about
Okay.
the difference between what was scored and ranked and what
Right.
we're bringing forward. But I brought this to orientation as well. Outside of those established criteria by SMT, we do have to consider the reserve balances. We have to consider how much we're using, and when we're funding a reserve from a transfer from operating, and then we're doing more projects than that operating transfer is, and the reserve's already in a deficit, it becomes problematic, right? So that's something that we had to consider even after the ranking was done. The debt repayment limit, which I'll show you later on at the end of this presentation, it's going to become a problem in a couple years where we're going to hit the max of the debt repayment limit if all of these projects were to go forward. So that's something else council needs to consider, because the debt forecast that I have does not include a community center. So these are things where we have to make some really challenging decisions to make sure that we fit within that debt repayment limit. As I indicated to council at orientation as well, or cash flow becomes an issue. So it has to be considered in making these recommendations to council as well. And then the affordability. So yes, we can transfer more money from operating to the capital budget, but at what cost to the ratepayers? So those things were considered as well.
Hey, Councilor Drewley has a question, Councilor.
Yes, I do. The Merritt Road reconstruction was in the 2014 budget. We moved it out of there, and I don't see it on the 2015. From Line Avenue to Rice Road?
It was moved, I believe, we don't anticipate development in that area at this time, so it can be pushed back one more year. I think it's 2016 now. So, like, we're doing four Robinson Roads being completed right now to deal with urban development. And Merritt will, again, it's just a best guess that development won't occur in the area, so the need won't be there. No sense putting the pipes in the ground if the need does not exist.
But with Rosewood started already, that, you know, it seems to me that it's gonna move up, but okay, if that's.
Well, Rosewood is serviced off
That's
of Rice Road.
Right, okay.
So the servicing's already there.
Yeah, but there was one home, through you, Mr. Mayor, the house right on the corner of the south side of Merritt.
Yeah.
And the east side of Rice that missed out on the sewer hookup when the region did that, and it's gonna be hooked up off Merritt apparently when it goes through.
That's correct. That's Chimino's, and they're fully aware of that. That's when they have a septic system and
Yes, they do.
they have municipal water already off the new water main. I could be wrong.
I don't think so, but
Their concern was the
I'm not
septic
sure either,
was-
but they did say that there was a hookup, it was gonna be a little more costly because it's coming in off of Merritt.
Yeah, house is slab on grade, so they had some other plumbing type issues going on there. So
Okay.
again, not a big deal. We can certainly remedy that, but our understanding was there wasn't an immediate need for that. Just make sure we take care of it when we do go there.
The reason I asked this, because in the past, I had some questions asked about when the water and sewer were gonna come in, and it was projected to be 2014, and some people held off on some of those older houses on the north side of Merritt, and it may start becoming critical to them, because one guy was ready to put a whole new septic system in, and he's waiting, putting Band-Aids on, just so that he can wait until the sewer comes in, but 1 year may not make a difference. Okay, just I asked that question, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first department coming forward was the information technology. The reserve was in a deficit in 2013. We did get some equipment and stuff in that came in lower than anticipated, so it's maintaining a healthy balance at the end of 2015. There is a 10-year capital plan on that as well, so the reserve is building up a little bit over the 5 years, and you'll see after 5 years it's in a healthy balance of 182 based on this recommendation. and that would include some issues that we had previously with email, as council is aware, with respect to the spam that happened. Online email backup is something that the IT coordinator is strongly suggesting, so that can't happen again in the future. And the remote backup from the main servers as well is to make sure that it's off-site and kind of in a cloud, so that if anything goes down, we have access to every item that we need from our networks. And then annual PSAP requirement replacements and so forth. The smart boards, basically we're using the creative problem solving process all the time. We're buying a lot of materials to support that process, and we can use a smart board easily and draw things all over the place and pinpoint and so forth, and then copy and paste it and take it with us. So that's one of the recommendations, is that we go towards something that's more technology based and easily used in-house. So that's the recommendations, and this will be brought forward to council on the capital budget as well. In the town facilities, there was some significant things moved out of 2015, just because, not only because of the ranking, but because, as you will see, this reserve is in a deficit. There's things that hit this reserve this year that were council approved, staff change room at the arena, the portable, and so forth. So it's impacted the opening balance for 2015 significantly. So we felt it prudent to take a little bit of a break in this reserve, start building it up, and then start working on some of the other projects as the years progressed. One of the other things in here was a lot of work you'll see in the 5-year capital with respect to this municipal building and doing Band-Aid type items, and we're waiting for that study to come back from the architect on what needs to be done exactly, and maybe do it in lump sum tandem so that we're not wasting resources over the next 5 years taking care of that stuff. So what's only being recommended right now is to do the energy efficient lighting at the town hall. So there's a request there for 123, and you'll note that the Maple Acres architectural design is identified in there at 75,000. So that is something that's been brought forward. It is development charges able, and also would be put on the debenture for the whole building if the council decided to move forward with that. But the design is included in this budget.
Can you note that it's Maple Acre and not Maple Acres?
Sure.
Thank you.
Quickly, Madam Treasurer, where'd you get that number from? Is that based on a percentage of architectural fees for an actual capital construction?
Yeah, it's based on similar projects done of similar scope and size, and that was the number that was thrown out. Until we get a more rounded one, we're a little bit conservative.
Okay,
We might be a little bit high, but
yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good. Usually 5%. Okay, that's fine. No problem.
okay. Okay. In the fire services, we just had the one pumper truck that is in need of repair. It is over, the useful life of it is 20 years. It's now 23, going on its 24th year. Due to the insurance impact that could happen, we felt it prudent to move this fire truck forward. It still leaves a small deficit in this reserve, but the reserve becomes very healthy very quickly, and we do have almost a 20-year plan for the fire services with respect to bunker gear and other equipment that they need. So, in the Public Works Road area, I don't see on two slides because it's too large, but you'll see that we've done some work to the requests that were originally there and what's been brought forward, just because the reserve is low for a roads budget, and we're trying to build that up. So the projects that have been identified to go forward are listed here, and they're hard to see, so they're on your slide package that you have printed out. The biggest one being the bridge replacement that has to happen with respect to bridge repair program that the Public Works Department has had a study done on. Other ones are just small roads repairs. Roland Road is in there as well as Highland and Effingham Street reconstruction. In Public Works vehicles, the next slide. The items that are identified are those items that have been, there's a few newer items in there, the small 7,500 for the dust control, but the sidewalk tractor snowplow was anticipated to be used to be budgeted for 2015. It is We have identified that every piece of equipment is at its useful life or extended beyond it before it is asked for recommendation to be renewed or replaced. So these are the projects that would be going forward for recommendation to council.
Sorry, just on the sidewalk snow clearing equipment, we're currently renting, is that correct?
We are not renting anymore at this time. We did rent in the late spring or late fall or winter, sorry. Winter into spring, and then you are renting right now? Okay, sorry. We rented, we rented again, or it's
Yeah, it's the same unit that we had last year. It's very effective with respect to snow removal. It's a larger unit and has the power to bust through the larger drifts and that sort of thing.
But you're recommending that we don't rent, that we buy?
Yes, the versatility of that unit, when equipped with the right attachments, starts to allow us to get into stormwater detention ponds and that sort of thing. Do all sorts of, becomes more versatile. It's a trackless type unit that's built, I believe, in Tilsonburg.
So it's more than a plow, a snow plow, it's a turf mower.
Yeah, there's no limit to the things that you can hook to it, that are all manufactured by that
Sounds like
company.
fun, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so on to the wastewater. Again, these projects always tie into the roads projects.
I had one question,
sorry.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. So when you say that that tractor has that kind of versatility, I'm anticipating then that it replaces some other equipment or some other cost, rental or otherwise?
It replaces the rental equipment, and it allows us to do some of the projects that we are unable to accommodate right now for customer service purposes.
And we don't accommodate them at all? We don't contract it out? We don't?
There's just not any way to do it. So they're left undone.
Okay, so that's pure increase in cost?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And service, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the wastewater budget, again, these are projects that tie into the roads reconstruction projects. If there's Highland Avenue, for instance, is getting a sanitary service, so that's been identified here. So they all tie in, or they are part of the annual programs that the Public Works Department has in the wastewater department. We have the same thing with the water department. Again, they tie into the roads reconstruction programs. And you can see the difference in the reserves in the water and wastewater area. They remain healthy with a reserve of over $2 million at the end of 5 years. And Mr. Manna will likely say it's just because our water system's in such good repair. So.
Gurley.
Mr. Mayor, we're nearing 10 o'clock. We need a motion to continue.
Thank you. You'll make that motion, Councillor? So moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Pat? You wanted to get under the wire, didn't you? Or hurry it up? Motion to complete the agenda, Councillor, is that?
Yes.
Or 10:30, whichever comes first?
Okay. That's just what I said.
Motion to complete the agenda or 10:30, whichever comes first. Is that good? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carried.
In the Parks and Recreation budget, as you'll note, as I indicated before, the reserve was in a deficit going into 2015, but based on the projects that we've identified, we're able to keep that balance positive, and it grows nicely over the next 5 years as well. With you'll see the whole of the 5-year projects at the capital budget meeting. But that includes the active transportation master plan that was presented tonight is in there. It was already identified in previous years, and some of the other items out in the Parks and Rec area. The cemeteries.
Take care, Wayne.
Again, this is an area where we don't have enough contributing from operating to cover some of the works that might be done out at the cemeteries. We are taking this budget back and going to look at what roads need to be done and how we can maybe expand them out so that the reserve can try to build itself out. Despite it not supposed to, it is not supposed to have an impact on our operating. It does annually because there's just not enough funding in the operating to cover the expenses for running the cemeteries. So that's what this budget looks like. Community planning and development, this is the reserve I was indicating where there's a significant deficit over the next 3 years as well. But we slowly are building up the reserves so that we can meet not only the requirements of the next year, that also we can meet the requirements of the studies that are proposed for the next 5 years. And it starts to become healthy after that time. The last one we received is the 20 from the library services. We received this morning, I believe, and we have not had a chance to review it. There's some items in here that would actually go under our facilities budget and not within the library services. So this needs to be taken back and discussed with staff of the town, and a new revised budget brought forward by the library for the capital budget process. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about questions before I moved on, or?
Are there any questions at this point?
Let's talk about debt.
Okay, Madam Treasurer, I think we saw part of the slide before, the next one.
Yes, this is just what our current debt obligation is. This was brought to council at the one of the last CAL meetings, just to show where we are. And again, the top debt being the operating debt, and the only debt having an impact on our operating budget tax levy. The middle debt is the debt funded by development charges, and the bottom one there is shown as parkland dedication funding. So we're just dealing with the 681,209 that hit our operating in 2014. So here is my...
Just, Councillor Kersey, you and I were chatting about Canberra Road. There it is coming off in 14.
That's correct.
Thank
and
you.
There's a fire services debt coming off in 2015 as well.
Thank you.
So in order to, project out with all the projects that are being brought forward by staff, I do a projection of what our proposed debt might look like, both operating DC and includes any loan obligations we have as well. So we are very, very healthy till 2018, where we run into a significant problem with the debt repayment limit. So we need to take that into consideration with respect to some of those projects that are coming in the 16-17 budget, and different sources of funding for them other than debt.
Which, through you, Ms. Mayor, does not include the provision for the capital, for the community center.
It does not.
So if that's financed, that have to be incorporated into this calculation.
That's correct.
That's why this is important to look at this.
This includes Maple Acres addition of the 1.3. We did put that in there because
that's included in this?
That's in here. So, and then much of the roadways, and as per our policy for the DC, because we don't have a lot of the DC reserve built up, we were debenturing that instead. That impacts this debt repayment limit. So there's not a lot on the operating side, but the DC eats up a lot of that debt room. So it's something that I just want council to be cognizant of, and it forces us to make some really tough decisions with respect to what projects move forward.
What do you use for growth assumption?
On this, I did a 2% on revenue. It's all based on our revenues, not on growth. It's on the provincial debt repayment limit is 2% or 25% of our gross revenues that we bring in. So I just did an increase of 2% to be very conservative. It could be much higher, but I don't want to risk, over assuming. So this is just taking a 2% over the next 10 years. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
So based on that, if we did the projects that are on that debt repayment schedule over the next 10 years, this is the next 5-year impact on the operating budget. If the operating budget was static quo, all things being equal, you'll have a 1.52% in 2016, and then it'll go up an additional 2.57 in 17, drops down to 76% increase, and then it lowers because 0.76, sorry. And it drops down because some debt starts to fall off in 2019. So 18 being one of the years that is challenging for us with respect to debt repayment limit. That's my presentation.
Questions, comments? Councilor Papp?
As Desi Arnaz used to say, Lucy, we got some thinking to do. We gotta-
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I mean, this is just, considering the other capital, Gary and I were just figuring on we had to borrow, and I'm being simplistic, pardon me, through you,
Right.
that we could go out at this point and borrow approximately $25 million, right? We could borrow that on the open market, competitive rates for the construction of what we're looking at down there. But you're right, when you start getting closer down to 2018, we're strapped. Unless we're prepared to go out on a longer term, and that's a whole other series of discussions. So the key would be, it'd be nice, as the mayor has done for, or we've been able to do, is to get 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, which would be very helpful in easing the, because I think that people ask us these questions, you know, and they say, well, you've got lots of room. Well, yeah, but it diminishes.
Sorry.
And sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, there's so many impacts on this. I mean, this is, I'm trying to give you the worst-case
Right.
scenario right
Well,
now.
that's what I wanna
Because
see.
once this growth starts happening, Rosewood starts going, you're gonna start seeing some of these DC monies coming in.
That's the point,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's the
so,
point.
and then we don't need to debenture DC,
Right.
which frees up a ton more room. But I don't have that, and I won't forecast that right now until we know for certain. So
Good. Okay.
this year will tell a tale for us.
You're, liberal on your expenses and conservative on your revenues, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? So it's a first blush, I believe we need to receive it. Any other actions on it? I need a motion to receive. Is that what we're looking for? Councilor Ribbiak, Councilor Durley. Any other comments, questions?
No.
Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Committee input. Any committee input at this time?
I think before that, to another meeting.
I think so. The next meeting is when?
The next budget presentation is on the 15th of December with the water and wastewater budgets.
Okay.
Those will be coming first, and then capital in January.
The 15th is a council meeting, or is that a COW meeting?
It's a PMP.
It's a council meeting.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll add to the agenda to PMP, sort of committee input on this presentation and.
Yeah, we need,
Okay,
we need some
is that
time
all right,
to-
colleagues?
yeah. We need some time to digest this. Okay,
Okay.
that's good.
Anything further? There being none, I guess, so we need a motion to adjourn this meeting. It's been moved by Councilor Durley, second by Councilor Ribbiak. This committee of the whole meeting be adjourned until the next regular committee scheduled for Monday, December 15th, unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.